Call the meeting to order, please. This is the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, August 16th, 2018. The time is 7 p.m. Please call the roll.
President Self.
Here.
Trustee Pollock.
Here.
Trustee Giza.
Here.
Trustee Lumsden.
Here.
Trustee Ballerine.
Here.
Trustee Sedeby.
Here.
Trustee Peters. Here. Village Manager Francis.
Here.
Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Haley.
Thank you. If you please join us for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and good evening to everyone who is here with us tonight and those of you watching at home. If you are here with us and you'd like to address the board at any time, I ask that you just be recognized by the president and that you make your comments from the podium so that the folks at home can hear and see what you have to say. First up this evening are presentations and public comment. We begin with a presentation. This is the third in a series of presentations by Williams Architects concerning possibilities for redevelopment of our public safety and the old youth center facilities. Chief Weitzel.
Good evening, President Sells, Trustees, and Manager Francis. I'm just going to be up briefly. I want you to know that tonight Mark Bushhouse from Williams Architect is here, and he's going to go over various options for a new facility and outlining costs to remodel and maintain our current facilities. And I wanted the President and Board to know that your entire senior staff is here, so if you have any questions of them, they're here also to answer questions. Mark, thank you.
Good evening again. Yes, Mark Bushhouse, Williams Architects. Glad to be back before you. So this evening is, like the Chief said, it's a third of our three main presentations to the board about the work that we've been doing with your staff and others to look through the facility issues, needs, and possibilities for the Village of Riverside. And the goals of this study has been very straightforward. We have to figure out what you have. So we need to determine the condition of your buildings, historic significance of some of them, what are redevelopment guidelines for those that are historic. Then we had to look at what you need. So that was looking at current and long-term facility space needs, comparing the areas you have to the kind of square footages that would be required to meet the facility needs both now and for the foreseeable future for the village. Then the last step is to look at options to make changes to your facilities in one way or another to really get you from what you have to provide the space and quality of facilities that you need for the future. So with that, what have we done? We did, as the Chief said, we have done the existing conditions review and historical review. Those were presented back in May. And then what do you need? The space programming, we completed that and presented that in June. So now the current step is to look at options to get you from what you have to what you need. And as we started this process, we had some ideas being discussed about what that might look like, what things we might investigate. The first one was to look at additions, changes, remodeling, or replacement of buildings on this existing campus that we're on right now. We also talked at the beginning of the process that, well, is there possibilities for Fire Station 2? That area, what about at Public Works or even around the water tower? Are there opportunities there? Well, as I've been working through this process, I think I can say from the meetings and reviews that we've been doing that it became very clear that the first priority was really to see if it was possible to do what we needed for the village on this site. And then other sites could be compared to that possibility. And as we looked at Fire Station 2, it really didn't have the area to do the kinds of things that were needed. It was going to divide departments. Public Works, while a good facility, really uses all the land that's available there for improvements and really does not allow another major facility of some kind to be added to it. Then the water tower site, right downtown here, again, a very tight site, very historic, really doesn't lend itself at all to major additions or changes that could meet real facility needs that are here. We also then talked about, could there be other sites in the community that could support some real facility improvements for the village? And again, comparing to what might be possible here. And even though we did have some conversations about some other sites, each one had real issues, whether it be floodplain or what its current uses are that are important to the community, or whether it may be land that could possibly already be on the tax rolls and providing income. So as we went through those as well, there really weren't any other sites that could compete well against this one, as long as we could make this one work. And then, of course, as part of that, then we need to compare some budgets. And as much as there are certainly options on this site to rebuild and renew, we are also hired and tasked to look at the cost of saying, well, what if we don't build something new? What if we just stay in the facilities and repair them and maintain them and make them functional buildings that are reasonably code compliant as we might need to, and live with that for the next 20 years and really not embark on some major new facility improvement or addition process. So we did that. And then we've come up with two options on this site, options A and B, and we did budgets for those. So let's talk for a minute about this existing campus. This is where we are here in the town hall. We have Riverside Drive, we have the Des Plaines River, and this building here is significantly used by the township with some areas on the west and east that are used by the village. There's a row of buildings in the back that were built at various times called the old service center, the old maintenance building, and then the old public works with an old youth center on top of it. Again, not what they're typically used for now. These are used by significantly public safety, police and fire for a lot of very important uses. And then, of course, the suspension bridge over the Des Plaines, the river. Then the other site, we spent some time looking at other sites. Again, this is the water tower site where the recreation department currently operates their reception area, their staffing, and they also run some programs out of a couple of rooms they have there. Then here is Fire Station 2 on Pine Street next to the abandoned historic water tank, and they function out of there. So the recap of the existing conditions were, we looked at that series of buildings behind this one, the old Public Works, Youth Maintenance, and Service Center, and really that facility was deemed to be by ourselves and the engineers that reviewed it in very much poor condition with significant issues. And frankly, instead of considering really trying to refresh that building into something that has a good long-term life again, if there's any other things you want to accomplish, we really recommended that building simply be demolished. Then looking at this building here that we're in now, the village zones within the township hall. So we didn't look at the whole township hall, really just the village areas of it. Certainly a building of this age, while certainly built well, does not meet today's requirements for energy efficiency or accessibility, though some improvements have been made. And of course, safety and security issues. And then really, there's a lot of issues here and more significantly on the public safety departments for poor layouts, difficult adjacencies, degrade service to the public and how staff can work together, which you really have a staff here that works significantly together. Then of course, there are a lot of aspects with the heating and cooling systems, the lighting and plumbing systems that are in need of replacement, fixes and corrections, so we could have a good energy tight building here with comfortable systems so staff isn't trying to survive with coats, fans, and little electric heaters. And then then overall parking is an issue. At peak time, staff would need about 62 parking spaces, and right now you have about 48 for them. And realistically, there really aren't any spots on the site for visitors. They really have to park out in the street. Any questions on the recap of existing conditions? Space program, again, a quick recap of that. The village is expected to grow from population now of about 8,875 to about 9,937 by 2040 by CMAP. That's about a 15% growth. However, in reviewing that growth and the stable boundaries of the community, talking with staff about functions, there's a high degree of confidence that overall staffing levels will remain pretty much constant. There might be some shifting between some departments to account for change in the years ahead. So we really didn't have to account for much in the way of growth, just mostly, again, some moving around, some change. So those space programs for your village hall functions, including administration, community development, finance, recreation, Riverside TV, police and fire, all of those would add up to a building a bit over 52,000 square feet if it was built as a newer building. And again, back to parking, right now you've got about 48 on space, and we figure you need about 62 for staff. Plus, it'd be great to have some on-site parking for visitors. Again, generally speaking, just the typical comings and goings, somewhere in the range of 6 to 12 would likely be adequate. So here's a little 3D view here of your existing facilities that we've entered into our computer system. I just messed that up. All right. Here's Riverside Drive. We're looking from the north, looking southeast. Here's Township building with the public safety addition. Back here is those series of buildings we described that are not in very good shape. Here's some staff parking areas around that. The sidewalk and the suspension bridge over the river to the forested area. There's some parking along the street, just to give you some orientation. And then from the view, if you are over the river looking northwest, again, the river, the suspension bridge, the series of buildings along the river, Township Hall, police and fire here, and again, some parking areas here used by staff and some staff parking back here as well. Then, of course, there is a bit of a green space to the east of the campus. Again, option A description, I don't really want to spend time reading this with you because I'm going to verbally say these things as we look at the next image here. This is a site plan showing option A. Again, Riverside Drive wrapping around here, the Des Plaines River, the existing Township Hall. And in this area, we have removed the existing building and we built the fire and police facility here. We've put a connecting link, as we call it, with a new main entry into village functions. The zone that is now police and fire has been remodeled into the village hall areas for administration, community development, and finance, which just about fills this. So now they can all function in the area that they need. And then the area where we are now here back in the meeting room off the lobby, that would remain because that's part of township areas. But where administration, finance, and community development try to fit into right now, which they really don't. One option that we've explored is possibly moving the recreation department, moving their reception area, registration, and their staff areas here to have a great public presence off this lobby. And then possibly Riverside TV could have some of their equipment here because it would fit, and they could also, because they also support township meetings that are held in this room. So overall, we have got police and fire. This is the apparatus bays for the fire station, the 4 big bays. Vehicles are heading out here to get onto Riverside. This is a very important placement of the buildings on this site. This is about the only place on this site where we can get a space large enough for the equipment and have the turning radiuses and access and visibility for them to safely exit and get out onto Riverside Drive. So this placement is very critical for a successful apparatus room. Then with police next door, they can have, again, places for the public, administration, other departments of them. And then around the back, we would have patrol parking that's covered, a sally port for bringing in prisoners, and detention areas in the back corner here. So this would be the back functioning and staff areas for the department. And since we've lost some parking here, we're talking about bringing in a new drive and a surface area parking lot in this green space to the east of the municipal campus. Sidewalks could remain significantly as they are. Certainly we can put a lot of plantings around this parking lot to really diminish its effect and appearance. Now we're going to go upstairs here. So again, the township building is here. Now we're looking at roof areas that are over the additions that were done for the village. Now in this area, again, where this is like the upper area of the garage for the fire trucks. And now this second level has the fire living quarters, their administrative areas, some storage. This zone here has some aspects of police. And significantly, we would put a training room up here. This training room would be a multi-purpose area that could support a lot of functions. It will be used significantly by police and fire for their training operations. It'll be used for the police for what they call NEMERT classes, where multiple agencies can come in and have training. It can be used for board meetings, so now we can move out of this space maybe into one that has enough room for most of the people that come most of the time, improve the audio visual. And then this space could also have the staff lunchroom, which is a great place that could also support that training room. And then over this garage sally port, we could actually put a green roof and put a deck so that the possibility exists that this training room could have good views of the river and a small upper level patio that could be used to allow access to the outdoors and views outside. This is the small roof over the patrol parking areas there. They're now going to go down to the basement. Again, the township hall, they use most of it in the middle, but there are two basement areas on the west and on the east that the village uses. This area is very substandard, low ceilings, difficult access and accessibility. We're thinking that could be files and storage. On the east side, this is in much better condition, and with proper elevator access, it would be excellent to use for some archives, storage, move your IT functions over there, and possibly even an emergency operations center if the village so desired. So then we would build the upper level here and basement here, and this would be support areas for police, locker rooms, things like that. Again, this connecting link between the two to make all these floors work together very, very well. And here's a 3D view again from the north looking south and to the east. Now you see these buildings is larger than before. It fills out the site better. This is where the fire trucks and ambulances would come out onto Riverside. Township Hall really looks the same. There's some visitor parking now right off of Riverside, and the main entrance to the Village Hall would be here. Just a quick comment. We draw these new things as rectangles. We're trying not to put an architectural style out there. This building could match the Township Hall. It could be completely different than Township Hall. That's a conversation and debates for later days, but right now, just to give you a sense of how this fills the site and how it works with the surrounding roads, this helps us show it in 3D. Here, as you can see, we've tried it and shown some added and more maturing trees in this area here. This is the drive to the new parking lot that would be in this triangle. The sidewalk going back to the suspension bridge would remain basically as it is. Let's see. And then the Riverside, again, now you see the mass of the building. We've kind of maintained the retaining wall area where it is. You can see the parking lot more easily here that we've added with the entrance and the trees and plantings that we're proposing to diminish its impact. And then the covered parking here over at Patrol. This is the Sallyport garage that could have a green space on it. And then this area here could have some nice training room and meeting spaces that could have great overviews of the river. Any questions on option A at the moment that I could answer? Okay, option B, again, they're described in your packets with some individual items. Let me back up to this one more. This option here really keeps parking about where it is. You have about 48 now, and this puts you at about 49. So we haven't lost spaces. We've had to relocate and use some green space to do it, but we're basically maintaining, and we really haven't improved that. So option B is a lot of what option A is with some important additions. In this one here, again, same basic remodelings happening inside of Township Hall with recreation and Riverside TV on the west, Village Hall, admin, finance, and community development on the east, a link that's now the new main entrance for Village Hall, police and fire occupying the main level of this footprint. Again, the apparatus room in the same location here with some visitor parking. But we're shrinking the footprint a bit because we're adding more basement area and making some other changes. That allows us to achieve a noticeably larger parking lot behind here for staff and also behind the library that they currently use. And then this parking lot here, instead of just being a parking lot on grade, actually starts at grade and slopes down to about 13 feet below grade. So it drops all the way down to line up with the basement under this building. So this is an access point for parking here, but it also provides a way to get under the buildings and park in a basement. Also of interest, this main feature, a new feature here is we are pushing the buildings forward to the north a little bit, changing the retaining walls more, and providing a really wonderful 8-foot wide or maybe more new riverfront walkway that would start west of the library, come along and end up to the east side of the property, connects in with the bridge. And we'll show you in another slide, but this area that is staff parking is proposed to be decked over it with green space on top. And then this walkway actually works its way up to it and then back down again. So as you would use this walkway, you will actually end up on top of this deck. So let's take a look at this on the second floor. You see the walkway coming in here from the west. It actually gets up onto it and proceeds along the edge, works its way back down and continues to the east. This is a nice significant green space that we could have outside overlooking the river. Again, we're just showing some sitting areas in some zones green. Layout possibilities and features that could be put there are significant and could have a lot of possibilities. In this area here, again, we're showing this very tight to program. However, there's a wonderful opportunity here to put the training room, meeting rooms, all the way along this south exposure overlooking the river and connecting directly outside to this significant green space here. Could be a really pretty amazing feature to allow this training room and its support spaces to not only be used for the very functional needs of police, fire, and village staff as they hold their training and meetings, but in off hours, weekends, this could be a great resource in the community to provide great open space that has restrooms, it has meeting rooms, it has a lunchroom next to it for food servicing, and a really beautiful training room. Look at it, has some glass and great overlook. And then this space here, really on the deck, allows a lot of things. Frankly, if you let me dream a little bit, I look at this and say, could you get a private-public partnership going here? Is there a developer that would work with you to even expand this further? Could there be another floor? Could there be a restaurant? Could there be a boutique conference center here? I mean, if you can get some other people looking at this riverfront, and if you have some parking available, you might get some very interested private parties to help fund this project and end up with quite something here. So things we dream about. Then down the basement, now again, same thing with Township Hall, but now you'll see this parking lot that's on the east. It's gotten all the way down to well below grade, and now it feeds into a full-size parking lot underneath the building. And down here, we can put the lockup detention area and police evidence zones. These are great places to put those two features. Having an enclosed garage like this for the police would be excellent. And then access to these areas, so it would just be a very functional area for them. And frankly, during after hours on the weekdays, on weekends, doing some parking counts, the village needs for parking for their staff and police would pretty much just fit in here. So all that other surface parking you saw could be available for other uses in the evenings and on the weekends. So that has some real possibilities. And then looking at the 3D view, this one here, you'll notice if you look carefully enough, this building's pushed forward just a little bit north to allow the walkway behind it, but still fits well with the 4 apparatus bays for the fire trucks and ambulances to come out. Visitor parking to a new main entrance to the Village Hall. Again, Village Hall uses over here, police and fire, and then up above the other. You'll notice here, at least from this view and the trees that we're showing, this parking lot is not particularly noticeable, but still there. Then the next view, looking over the river, you can see how this parking area is a ramp as well, working its way down below grade, feeding into the basement. So as you would look across here, frankly, you're looking over the whole. You don't see vehicles that are down below. Again, I know green space has great value in this community, and we show things only because you've got to park somewhere, somehow. Still connecting to the bridge, here's the walkway working its way along. It works its way up to this nice deck area here. And again, this upper zone of this whole story, or even if you want to put something more on top of it, could be a very public spaces, other possibilities, but still, whatever is here, it's got really wonderful views overlooking the river and the forested area to the south, and even the visual interaction between the bridge, pedestrian bridge, and this area could make a good, interesting place to spend some time. Any questions on those two concepts before I tell you all the bad news? None of this comes cheaply, so let's talk about that. The first thing we investigated is going back through our existing conditions, reviews, code issues, et cetera, and said, okay, if the village decided we really aren't going to go and embark on a major project here, we're going to stay with the buildings that we have. However, we recognize we're going to keep them for 20 years, and so we're going to make them energy efficient. We're going to replace things that are broken. We are going to meet basic safety, exiting, and handicapped accessibility requirements. We're going to improve our heating and cooling systems. And as time passes, we're going to replace roofs that we need to on here. And we're going to do these things in a way that doesn't expand the building, doesn't change the layouts. They will still function like they are now. But if you just say we're going to hunker down and keep using these buildings and we're going to fix these really serious code and safety issues as far as how the building is built, that's not cheap either. We're looking at $6.7 to $9 million. And that's if it all got done in the year 2020. So, and frankly, if you're going to choose this path, which is fine, but if you choose this path, most of the work should be done very quickly and at one time. If you drag this project out over 20 years, those numbers will go up considerably, not just because of escalation, but because when we were estimating this, we put in unit costs that are based on a volume of work being done at one time. That's of significant value, so you get good general contractors, efficiencies of scale, and a lot of work is getting done all at one time. And those take in all costs. I mean, even on this one here, you're going to have to rent temporary space, move all the functions at police and fire that are using the building behind. They're going to have to go somewhere temporarily while you make all those fixes and changes. You're going to be shuffling some people around in here. We figure you'll buy some furniture. We have we have, again, 2 years of escalation. We've got a 20% contingency factor. So this number is intended to be an all-in and reasonable about what you would actually spend to get this done. Then option A and B, again, same story. We did an all-in budget where it includes moving some people out temporarily. It includes all new furniture. It includes escalation. It includes contingency. And frankly, you will end up with buildings that are good municipal quality, that are being done in the suburbs, good, durable kinds of places that are expected to last for many decades. I don't know that these dollars would buy you a building that has all the detail and grand shapes of the building we're in right now. Things like this are more expensive to do now, but if you look around the suburbs and see some good quality municipal buildings, this is the kind of estimating that we did for this project. So the real difference between these two, obviously, is like $2.5 to $3 million between A and B. B, really, the extra dollars are going to the additional parking, the larger basement. It's going to the deck over the parking areas to put that outdoor space, and all the work to get that riverfront walkway in place. So those dollars add about that much money. The building sizes are really the same between the two. And so it's really what features you want and how far you want to go. Now, recognizing these are huge numbers, and how you pay for it and how the community reacts to this, we're here to support and work through this with you. But if you ask us what these things cost, this is where we start. And we don't want to kid people that things are cheaper than they are. These are all-in budgets. We know it's a lot, but it does get these projects done for you. And once you pick yourself all off the floors, we'll talk about next steps. Okay, so recommendations from here. Our hope tonight, if so possible, for the board to review these ideas and give us direction on which option or some combination of those options that we put out there are preferred by the board. From there, we also would think it'd be wise for the board to direct staff to investigate what this means for funding, to see what kind of funding is available, what does it mean to the citizens of this community to spend this kind of money on their buildings. And then as part of our services, we have included at your request to have 2 public meetings that could be scheduled in the weeks to come to go over all of this with the public and garner their input, ask questions, and work through this. Then ultimately, when that process is done, we would hope the board then would continue to meet and review and discuss, and ultimately decide based on the public input and all the information they have, what are the best next steps for Riverside. So there we are. Anything I can answer at this time, be happy to.
Impressions?
The Riverwalk and the green roof is a $2 million add-on?
Yeah, we're building more retaining walls in the deck and, yeah. Right. Yeah, I just did the pieces.
And subgrade parking and,
And subgrade parking too, I'm sorry, yes, and the additional underground parking, yes.
Did you explore any of the private land on Burlington that's vacant right now?
We did not specifically look at those sites. I think back to the statements I made earlier on, at least when we were getting into this, I was hearing from you folks that there was a strong preference that if it could be made to work here, that would be the best option. Other sites can be looked at, but a number were mentioned. I'm not sure if we really had a long conversation about that particular site, but each one seemed to have a real impact that was seen as real negative. Is it in the floodplain? Does it compete with other important community uses that are occurring there now? Is this private property that would come off the tax rolls? Would it be large enough? Those are the kinds of things that were brought up for each of these sites. Now, if there's a desire to look at another site and it is viable, we're happy to do that.
Is the four-bay apparatus room, does that then eliminate the need for fire station 2? Yes. So we'd have everything together in one spot, and this would be the only thing we'd have to maintain, right?
correct.
And it would move all of the current Parks and Recreation operations from the water tower campus to this new site.
All of that, and then there is money in these budgets to then refurbish at a fairly minor degree the water tower buildings, the lower level where the rec department uses it. So all of those spaces could be used for programs. Instead of having staff there or reception and registration, all that would move here, and then that could be for all programs.
And just so the board and the folks watching understand too, that another immediate need that we have is the repair of the water tower itself. And I think Mr. Bailey has been looking at that. So that would be an additional cost on top of what we're looking at, which is, I think last time we looked at it was around the $1 million range. Is that? And that's because of the structural problems that we currently have with the water tower itself, which is a pressing need. So that would have to be included in this,
All those
this
ideas.
project.
How big of a footprint, square foot wise, would the ideal land base be to build on? When you say 52,000
Square feet.
I think, for the buildings.
Right. Well, there's so much that varies. What about parking? Do you have to do stormwater as a separate basin? What are the access points for police and fire? Are you close enough to roads? What kind of zoning setbacks do you have to live with? Can we dig a basement, or are the soils or water issues problematic? You can tell I can't give you a simple answer to that. We could have to do some analysis, because I think first and foremost, you would continue to use this building and the spaces that you have here for village functions. So really the only thing you could probably move off-site would be the public safety building. And I think that was 52, we were around 35,000, 32,000, something like that would be a public safety building. And so if we did that, maybe 20,000 square feet on the main level, plus parking, that could be another acre, plus some stormwater. We probably would need something in the range of 2 to 3 acres. Again, there's a lot of variables there that each site is reasonably unique about stormwater and parking and access.
Would Fire Station 2 property become surplus property then?
It would not be needed, from what I'm
So
understanding.
we would not need to use that for any public facility?
My concern when I reviewed it earlier was just the location of it. I feel like the swinging bridge and the area right there is just so iconic to the town that putting this building there would, and I think what you guys have done with the walkway and the green space is fantastic. But, we explored all the other alternatives. When I say Burlington, I'm talking about some of the buildings that are there that are privately owned, but aren't being used right now. Is that an option that we've explored or talked about even? That's just such a fantastic location right there. Like between where the old post office and Village Market and PNC Bank was. So right on Burlington, between Riverside Foods and Shamrock Garden. It's private property, but I'm just saying, that land right there is just beautiful.
The middle of our business district.
Right.
Pull a fire truck out onto Burlington.
Well,
Again, if
Give
you'd
it
like
the
to
fire
do a
department,
quick look, we can, just if it helps, but yeah.
So you mentioned the dream about possibly a private-public partnership and a third floor.
Right.
Do you have any sense of how much a third floor would add cost-wise?
Oh, cost-wise,
Yeah.
or, well, generally, buildings of the quality we're talking about, all costs end up being around $400 a square foot. In some ways, they should spend less because we've already built the site work around it. On the other hand, if it is this floor that has big public spaces and is designed to be appointed to really draw people in and be used in a very interesting and exciting way, that could push it back up. So I probably would put you around $400 a foot if it's public spaces. If it's things like other offices or other uses, we could cut that number down 100, 150 a foot, getting down to 300, maybe 250, something in that range.
What's the square footage?
Of the whole.
Well,
If we had another
potential
floor.
I think that zone is about 7,000 square feet, plus the fire area is 7,000, so if you put those two together, we're about 14,000 square feet if you wanted to go up another level.
and is it imperative to have the facility in the interior of the downtown? Or is it possible to have it on the different location?
Good question.
For the safety buildings.
So say, I think it's, not having it downtown is in some ways functionally fine. There are some fire and police departments that prefer not to be downtown because if traffic gets heavy in their downtown area, they'd rather be a little bit outside and come into it. That said, one of the things I have discovered in working with your staff is that they have a significant level of supporting each other about getting things done and coordinating work with very few people. And one of the reasons they can run as tight a ship as they do here with the number of people is because they're all in one place. And they're all near each other and they can coordinate and support. So, it's not unusual for anybody to support anybody here. And that's very helpful if they're all in the same place. Now, having police and fire next to each other is I would say, the most important because they have the most overlap between them. They also share a lot of the same kind of uses. So yes, if you had to pull a piece out and go somewhere, I would think it would be police and fire. I think, and could that move a little bit out of downtown? I think it could. Again, we can talk to your chiefs behind me and see if they would concur. Parts that get difficult is again back to that big apparatus room. We've got these big trucks coming out of this big garage, and they need to have room in front of them where they can pull out and not be immediately on a road. Because if they open the door and they're right there, like what you have right now, that's a very unsafe condition because you're really crossing a sidewalk within 3 feet or 5 feet of leaving the door of the garage. You're just pulling out, and people can walk right in front of you. So we really want those apparatus bay doors set back from the road a bit. And down again, if you have a site that allows that, great.
I have two questions. Number one, alternative sites, and I don't remember if anyone can fill me in on this. What about the south, I guess, east corner of First and Forest, wasn't that talked about at one point?
Yeah,
Where did that
I can
resolve?
address that, and other people can chime in if they want to add to it. I mean, we looked at that with our engineers. The first issue is Forest Preserve. Riverside owns the road that goes through there, but all the other property there is Forest Preserve District property. It's also in a very troublesome floodplain. So in order to get it even buildable, would require substantial landfill to come in. Jessica, do you want to add?
It's actually floodway. And in confirming with Mark, you can't do anything in floodway. And so essentially, like the scout cabin is in the floodway. So we can do maintenance on it, but we really can't do any improvements. You can't build anything in the floodway. So that was essentially why it was completely dismissed.
I think years ago, another site that was considered for something like this with regard to fire and police was Harrington Park, that corner up there by Harlem. But then that has the problems of giving up park space. But as far as I can shape my mind. It's hard for me to imagine another spot in town where we have this much space. And to Mark's point, and what Manager Francis has said in the past, given the level of our staffing, there's a lot to be said for having our staff in proximity to one another because of the synergies that they use. I'm sorry, you had another
No, the
question?
second question, going along with that, if we have to put everything together, you mentioned that the costs here are what you would see in a standard municipality. Our buildings here are not really standard, and I would think most people here would prefer not to have the standardized look. This is what I'm thinking, the pushback you'll get. So do you have an estimate of what, if you were trying to do something that resembled more of what iconic Riverside is, to maintain that look?
I'm extremely reluctant to make up numbers
That's fine.
standing here.
I understand.
What can be spent on iconic buildings, we could go from $400 a foot to $500 or $600 a foot, or you can go to $1,200 a foot. I mean, there are some amazingly expensive buildings out there that are very iconic, and everyone knows them. And yeah, so can we do a very good-looking building for these kind of dollars? Yes. Will it fit the bill of how iconic Riverside wants them? We could work through that, but I think step one is kind of let's work our way through this thing.
In that regard, as far as the look of the building, I'm kind of the opinion that it would be a background building. In other words, we wouldn't necessarily want it to stand out. And this is the featured building of the site. We do whatever we can to enhance this. And this is kind of in the background, because great downtowns have featured buildings and they have background buildings that complement and kind of just fill in the space and are still high quality and attractive, but don't draw your attention necessarily. Also, a couple other things. I think too, if we didn't do it here, we would miss an opportunity to fix this problem we have here. It's not an attractive site other than this building. With the riverfront and the condition it's in and the youth center building, we'd still have that problem to fix, and it'd still be an expensive one. So it's kind of my thoughts on that. And then the other question I have for staff is, you talked about a third story and the opportunity to partner. Have we been in contact with any other local government taxing bodies about sharing and participating?
Yes, we have. And obviously, the school district is doing their facility evaluation. I think there is interest, but they have to complete their process that they're currently doing. But they have, on a number of occasions, reached out to me, and I've met with the superintendent, and we've been in discussions about the status of our progress in addition to theirs. So there is interest.
Good.
That's 2026.
Yes.
Any discussions with the township folks?
No.
Big elephant in the room or something? I mean, by the side, or we're building all around them. I mean, it seems very unusual to me that we wouldn't include them.
We have reached out to them, and right now there isn't interest in partnering.
Okay, I got one more
What
for
you're
you.
going to be doing next week with potential finance alternatives.
Well, we'll be meeting with our financial advisor from Spear Financial, who we utilize next week, myself and Director Johns, to discuss bonding and other opportunities and what potentially are Riverside's options for if we were to move forward with any type of facility and the cost components associated with it. So we're not prepared to necessarily report on that at this point in time.
Is the existing fire station that's bolted onto the historic building, is that considered historic as well?
The review said it is not a historic item. However, if you wanted to tear it down and put something there in its place, that could be quite tricky to do, because that is, I'll say, it become an accepted addition to the building. But if you simply said, if you were just simply going to remove it and patch the old township hall to look like it did, I think that is something that would be historically very acceptable. But to do something different there, I think would be pretty tricky.
How big is the footprint that's over there on Pine?
How big is that building?
The land?
Oh, the land, oh.
How many square feet?
The land that the fire station itself is on is extremely small.
No, I mean everything. I mean the parking lot, abandoned water tank, and the green space between the...
I don't have that size in my head. I know we did a quick sketch to see what would fit, and it was marginal at best. I don't know if anybody else has any...
I think it was less than an acre.
Yeah, it's less than an acre, right.
The other concern that was raised about that site along the around the rail line is that it's along the rail line.
Right.
And the concern for potential derailment or something like that. So I have could you go back to the slide that shows the upper level with the green roof? I just had one comment to suggest.
So again, the path.
The actual
Oh,
schematic.
the floor plan, I'm sorry, okay.
That one, right? No, that one.
Oh, the one here, that one?
Yes.
Okay.
My only suggestion with regard to this is that, I mean, one of the reasons that we're considering doing this, other than meeting our needs, is to take advantage, as Trustee Jesus pointed out, that this is one of the most beautiful locations in our village. And it seems to me that we want to make sure that we provide that vista to our residents for public space on an ongoing basis. So from my perspective, to have fire admin right on...
So this area here you're talking.
I would extend that, and I would put fire admin back up in the front, and then open that entire section up.
Right.
Not only to weekend use, but to continuous public use.
Okay.
So this could be a place where where kids could come to study, to get together. We could have that. I mean, like you were saying, you could have a wedding on that green roof, come into a reception area with that riverfront view. But I think if we're going to make this work for the community as a whole, and not just with regard to police and fire, we really need to focus on how we can maximize this use for public use
Okay.
on a continual basis, not just in off hours
Okay.
and weekends.
I have one more question. With regard to the parking spaces, you mentioned 70, was it 72?
75.
75, is that for the village staff, or is it village and township combined?
The parking space, we're not talking, none of the spaces that are dedicated to township uses are in these numbers at all. So these are village spaces that you're either using now or expanded.
So, oops, almost derailed us. Anything else at this point? Thank you very much, Mr. Bushhouse. We will, we'll follow the outline that you just put up there for us.
Okay.
We'll take a look at the finance aspect of this. I mean, I suspect, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that we're looking at some variation on option B, that if we're going to do this, that we are going to want to have the public component and the green. Oh, that was another question I had. LEED certification and things like that. I know some of our surrounding communities have had some luck getting some grant funding because of the LEED certification and the sustainability aspects. Does that figure into your?
Right now, we're talking about what it costs, where the money comes from. We don't have it. Again, that's not.
But isn't that the LEED certification comes from how it's manufactured, how it's built, and
Yes. Oh, yes. I mean, these buildings would definitely be very green if we build them. First of all, the building codes now require very green buildings, and again, we would add some features to that. So I'm very comfortable saying the buildings and the dollars we're talking about would definitely be quite capable of being a good level of LEED certified. It really comes down to, is this a certification the village wants? There's a cost to get it certified, but of course, if you can achieve grants to help pay for it, then that certainly makes it way more than worthwhile. So things we could explore with you when it comes to how we find the money.
so do I see a nod of heads when I talk about option B?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So.
I explore the private hearing, though.
Yes.
With-
Yeah, I mean, I would like more information about the potential third floor, and because it looks like we're talking $5.5 to $6 million to add that on the numbers that you suggested. That's if we did the entire.
The entire next
Entire.
floor, right.
space.
And would you probably want us to even do this drawing so that we showed more potential for public spaces along this whole south wall? Would that be it's a next little step that would be helpful?
I think that's very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
That has public access.
Okay, we'll enhance that and put more information to make that clear that that's what we're talking about.
Is there any way to get public access? I mean, we've got this parking lot right here that's
Right.
to the east, or to the west of the hall, but it seems to me
This area?
that might be a way people would come to the area, other than walking through the parking lot. I don't know if there's a way to get a sidewalk or something in there, but.
A way to walk off of the sidewalks here and come sort of right to this? Well, it could go through the building. That would be one very good way to get to it. And of course, from this side, you've got a riverfront walkway that'll get you to it. From the west of the library, we could get you there. Yes, we could look at putting some stairs in this area that would get you right up. So again, all possibilities.
Sorry.
I see where we're talking about.
Anything else at this point? Mr. Bushhouse, thank you.
Thank you very
You've
much.
given us a lot to think about.
Yes, sure we have. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Next up is a presentation by the Landscape Advisory Commission. I've been waiting all week to say this. Picnic like it's 1896. Ms. Olmsted.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm Kathy Maloney, and I'm in this life. I am the chair of the Landscape Advisory Committee, but actually, I'm coming to you from 1869, which you may remember, of course, is the year that Mr. Olmsted developed the plan for our village. And so we'd like to invite all of you and anyone in the room or watching to the picnic that's being sponsored by the LAC on Sunday, September 16th from 1 to 4 p.m. It'll be right out here in Swan Pond, kind of along the bluff. And it is picnic like it's 1869. So what can you imagine that being like in 1869? Well, first of all, it's bring your own everything. And if you wanted to look inside my picnic hamper, for example, you would see everything that I normally have at home. So I have my everyday china I will bring. I'll bring some oilcloths to wrap up my sandwiches and so forth. Of course, I'll have my tin cups that I use. Somebody showed me this, and I have no idea what this is. It's so flimsy, I can't imagine you would use it more than one time. So definitely bring your good, solid tin cup instead of these things. We'll have nothing for you to dispose of these things there. Somebody also showed me some very flimsy things that they called napkins. And really, I mean, they were like tissue thin. And I will, of course, bring my fine linen napkins. So please consider that. This is all about sustainability. It would consider if you were back in 1869, what might you bring? We will provide for you music. Of course, again, I listened to somebody had a little square thing, and it was very loud when they played it. We will have some elegant violin music, so I hope you enjoy that in person. We'll have nature tours of the area. You'll look a little bit, we'll show you what Swan Pond looks like and what it looked like back then. We'll have a tour of the park out here. I understand it's called Guthrie Park now. So we hope you can join us. There'll be more information on the website. And again, looking forward to seeing you in 1869. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my agenda said 1896. I apologize. Next up is public comment. Would anyone like to just, Mr. Spatney?
Good evening, Donald Spatney, 111 Woodside. I didn't know anything about the architectural presentation. I just want to make a brief comment. You shouldn't take any of that parkland to the east of the Swan Pond, of the suspension bridge. None of that. You know, we shouldn't be taking historic parkland That doesn't belong as a parking. I don't care how many fake pine trees you put around it. We've had a lot of artist misconceptions foisted upon this village that have turned out to be BS in a large way. But I came to say good things. I want to say the Public Works is really doing a good job of keeping the village nice. Doesn't it look good? I mean, I really think they, you know, when you come into Riverside, it's like you're into a green oasis. And too many times those people don't get anything good said about them, so I wanted to come and do it. The stop signs, the new stop signs, well, I think it's great that you put that flashing sign here, you know, to try to protect this crosswalk. I'm surprised someone hasn't been killed on this crosswalk. Maybe they have. But, you know, in the old days, they just rolled that thing and nobody ever stopped. So it's good, but a lot of people don't see that sign. Or I myself, you know, I have to really bring myself to remember it's there now. So it's good you got that flasher out there. The ones down Long Common I'm less in love with. And the ones on Nuttall I think are absolutely absurd. You know, why you have them at that intersection in front of the Tomek house. But and Evelyn Road, I mean, Evelyn Road? You need a stop sign at that T? I mean, I don't know about that. I asked a policeman about it, and he said it's the board decides that, so that's why I came here to ask about it. You know, what prompted somebody to put one on Evelyn Road? Yeah, the Army Corps, they're talking about that thing up there at the berm and everything. I just want to remind everybody that the Army Corps came here and they sold you guys a real bill of goods and presented a big thing, which I still kept a copy of. You know, how they were going to do the berm and bring in the 1,000 truckloads of soil and sod the whole thing, you know. None of it happened, of course. They didn't spend the money. And when I figured it out, I mean, they spent about $1.6 million on the whole thing. They didn't replant the trees properly. So be real careful dealing with the Army Corps, because once you sign that agreement, you know, you're screwed. You know, and everybody here said, oh, well, something for nothing. They're going to fix the Swan Pond. Well, we see how that is, right? I mean, I used to be able to walk from the Library Hill down to the bridge at night through there. I never twisted my ankle. It was a green grass. Kids used to play soccer down there, right? Soccer, you know. And all it required was to raise the wall about that far, but nobody did that. Instead, he called in these guys to grade it and crap it up. And it's swamp. You know, how many days we lose of the use of that park, only you guys know. And the water still comes in the tube, incidentally. The last thing I want to talk about is the idea that the village would engage in red light cameras. Those people should be prosecuted as a continuing criminal enterprise. Use the RICO statutes to go after them. It's absolutely preposterous. I know somebody waves $1 million and everybody screams and yells, oh good, they can buy equipment and you guys can buy this and you guys can buy that. But, you know, I'm going to show you. I got one. The violation says 0.6 of a second. 0.6 of a second late into the intersection. Well, you know, so I'm a retired guy. I can go on a Tuesday afternoon, go to court. There's 25 or 30 people there. I can protest it, listen to some senile guy who thinks he's a judge talk to you and tell you 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. You know, it's a big joke. What about the hundreds of people they gave these tickets to that can't go to protest them? They're just screwed. They just get hit with $100. And the company sets the camera any way they want. If they blink off every single camera, I mean, every single car that goes through there, regardless, stop, don't stop, if they just blink everyone, what's the pay rate? Do 70% of the people send them $100 because they can't bother to go to court and protest? You know, you're giving these people a license to steal. The whole setup of the thing is you let us blink the camera all we want, and if we're lucky enough to get some guy to come and pay us, well, you'll get $60. And you can hire some retired policeman to sit there and talk to people. You know, we shouldn't engage in this stuff. I mean, we ought to be better than that. And this lure of making money just because, I don't know, what do they make down there? $15 million between Berwyn and North Riverside? How could that possibly be legal? No. And all this crap about it being safety, I'm absolutely sure it's caused more rear end accidents, people slamming on the brakes because something's going to happen. You know, they're going to get a ticket, and the guy behind them hits them, where normally he would have gone through the intersection on the yellow because that's what it is. So really think about that, huh? We don't need that crap here. And actually, what somebody should do is start a class action suit and get them all thrown out, which they have done in some places. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I think it's just appalling that you even consider that. And you see, do I have anything else? Oh yeah, I want to talk about local businesses. We've got some really great businesses here. Riverside Garage, Riverside Foods. Oh, and I wanted to say, instead of running over to Costco and buying all that cheap crap, you could go down to the Minuteman. If you're using premium fuel in your car, they only mark it up from regular to premium 50 cents a gallon, not 80 or 90 cents like a lot of these gas stations do. So that could be economical, and you could support a good in-town business guy who's always supported the village. He's a nice guy. He's being driven out of business by Costco. So you got to look at that. And that's all. Oh, I got a recipe here to how to make homemade carpet cleaner. But you don't need to know that. Okay? So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
My name is Dr. Tahir Sheikh. I'm not a resident of Riverside, but I have owned property, and I've worked here for 37 years on Alden Avenue. You know, I'm a very conservative guy, and I'm sure you're very bright people. You have seen enough in life. You know, you talk about these expenses. You look at the North Riverside, how huge stuff they have built, and then keep coming after the taxes, more taxes, more taxes, more taxes, you know. And when we build these things, the maintenance will cost you enormous year after year after year. So please consider that. The gentleman who was here, I give him a lot of kudos. I don't know his name. I live in Oak Brook. These people came over there and asked us to install these cameras. You know, we felt that was an insult to a town like Oak Brook or Riverside. Riverside is a very respectable town. We do not need $100 fines from these people for anything at all. And do you know we took the cameras down? So my request to you will be for the sanctity of this town and respect people who pass by. You know, the gentleman said few seconds this way, that way. We have worked with all these cameras forever. Don't make this like a city of Chicago, please. I kind of felt bad listening to this gentleman. I've got a ticket one time like this, and that was in Villa Park. Our towns like these do not need extra revenue from these kind of gadgets. So I thought just kind of it bothered me, and I went to the hearing at Oak Brook, and we removed the cameras. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to reports of village offices. First up is my report, and I have a motion to appoint Suzanne Kale to the Economic Development Commission to fill a vacancy for a term to expire in 2020. You have her application and resume in front of her. She's highly qualified, and I think she'll make an excellent addition to the Economic Development Commission. So I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve her appointment. By Mr. Lumsden? Second. By Mr. Ballery? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden.
Aye.
Trustee Valerie. Trustee Sedovey.
Aye.
Trustee Peters.
Motion carries. I just want to take a moment and ask the board's indulgence. At the last meeting when we were discussing the red light cameras, I didn't say anything about the issue because I thought that it was probably pretty well known what my position on the red light cameras were. I've gotten several emails that over the last week or two that have made me think that that's not true. So I just want to reiterate, because I'm not going to be at our next meeting. If I was going to be at the next meeting, I would save this for then when you're going to be discussing it again. I don't believe that red light cameras are a good thing for Riverside. I understand that there is arguable evidence with regard to safety. With regard to red light cameras, there is evidence to suggest that red light cameras can reduce the right angle accidents at intersections, which tend to be much more serious in terms of injuries. But there is also just as compelling evidence to show that it increases accidents in right turn situations. There was a recent Case Western study that just came out in July that even suggests that it might increase accidents with regard to red light violations, because people slam on their lights, on their brakes when they come to a yellow light. So, but I do appreciate that's a reasonable thing to disagree on with regard to whether or not it's a safety benefit. What bothers me more, to be quite honest, is the industry itself. I think that my impression is that this is an industry that uses the rhetoric of safety and the promise of easy money to municipalities to market its products. We know from the studies that have been done by our local paper and Chicago papers that a number of these companies have poor reputation and some shady practices in their past. It bothers me that Riverside would contract with any company that might in some way tarnish our own reputation as a village. I don't like the tactic of using red light cameras as a revenue source. In my mind, it's very much akin to the discussion we had regarding video gambling. I think that there are certain uses of public authority that are inappropriate with regard to revenue generation. And most basically, I just think that it does not comport with Riverside's values as a welcoming community. I think it will reflect poorly on us, especially with regard to the efforts that we are making to let people know outside our community that we welcome them here. Now, having said all that, I have been concerned by some of the language I've seen, especially on social media, with regard to this issue. Accusing the board of a money grab or stealing money from residents. I think it's important, and especially it becomes more important, I think, that we understand that people of goodwill can disagree about issues like this. And just because someone else reaches a different conclusion doesn't mean that they're somehow immoral or bad. This is a legitimate policy discussion. I happen to come down on one side of it. I certainly understand and respect the views of folks who come down on the other side of it. And I hope as a community that we can keep it there. And lastly, with regard to something that Trustee Pollock brought up, I do think if we do go down this route, I think it's critical that we do competitive bidding, that we vet the companies, the various vendors that offer these services. And I would strongly encourage us to take into account not only the cost aspects of these various companies, but also their reputations. It's up to us to decide who this village wants to do business with. And if we're going to do this, let's find somebody that we can be proud to be partnered with. So thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it. That's all I have. Manager Francis.
I do not have a report this evening.
We'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. On the agenda this evening is to approve the voucher list of bills August 16, 2018, approve the Village Board Trustee regular meeting minutes of August 2, file and review the following: Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing and regular meeting minutes June 27, Community Development Department monthly report of July 2018, Fire Department monthly report of July 2018. A motion to approve the special event application for the Landscape Advisory Commission's Picnic Like It's 1869 event to be held on Sunday, September 16th. A motion to approve the special event application for the 12th Annual Right Ride to be held on Sunday, August 19th. An ordinance amending Title 3, Chapter 2, and Title 4, Chapter 3 of the Village Code of the Village of Riverside relative to advertising of alcoholic liquor. And a motion to approve an exclusive listing agreement with David King and Associates for the sale of 2710 South Harlem. Does anyone need anything removed for discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve. By Ms. Peters, by Mr. Ballerine, please call the roll.
Trustee Pollock. Trustee Giza.
Aye.
Trustee Lumsden. Trustee Ballerine. Trustee Sedby. Trustee Peters.
Motion carries. Next up are reports of departments, commissions, and trustee liaisons. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Please.
I am liaison with the Police Pension Board. The police pension assets currently are getting close to $10 million. By Illinois statute, any fund balance $10 million or less than $10 million is required to be 50% fixed income and 50% equity. As a result, it's very difficult over the long run to maintain even the 6.5% return that we forecasted from an actuarial perspective. Illinois statute allows us, however, once we reach $10 million of plan assets, to be able to shift into 65% equity investments and 35 debt instruments, high-grade debt instruments. It's possible with the collections that we're receiving right now from the tax assessment that we're going to hit that 10 million. My guess is, and Director Johns is looking into this, that we're going to come short, maybe $100,000 short of that. We only have to hit that $10 million for one point in time, and that allows us to have a new tool that would allow us to invest in higher risk, but higher yielding over the long run assets. So I've asked Director Johns and Village Manager Francis to look at the potential for us to make an additional contribution to the police pension fund to allow us to hit that 10 million and allow the police pension board that tool when they so choose to increase the equity component of their investments. We don't know exactly right now if that's $50,000, $100,000, $150,000, but we do know that the police pension is currently underfunded by $14 million. So I don't think $100,000 that's put in maybe 6 months earlier is going to make that big of a difference on the village finances. So I just want to highlight it. There's a lot of research still that needs to go into that, but there is the opportunity based on the timing of the collection of real estate taxes that we might be able to make that number next month. So I've asked them to look into it and potentially make that an agenda item for the next meeting.
Just as a follow-up on that, I'm very glad you brought that up. And if I don't mean to put you on the spot by this, can you explain though to the residents, because when you talk about the investment aspect of the police pension board,
right.
That is really something that is separate from this body.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you explain how the actual investment decisions are made?
Yeah, the police pension, our contribution to the police pension is to essentially write a check every year to assess and fund our portion of that. But the police pension is, and help me with this, but there is a statutorily created police pension board that administers that fund. We have no say whatsoever in the investments that are made or the administration of that. We do elect, one or two of the board members? 2 of the 5?
Yes, so there's 2 that are appointed by the village board, and then you have 2 that are active officers, and then you have one
retired officer.
Correct.
Yeah, so the majority of the police pension board is represented by either current or retired police individuals.
But who advises on investment strategy?
Currently we're contracted with UBS to provide that investment advisory.
And that individual is selected by the pension board.
Okay. Any other comment with regard to that? Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hearing no other liaison reports, we do have a director's report, I believe. Mr. Malchiotti.
Themselves. Just in case residents didn't get the e-flash or see our Facebook page, we have some exciting news. I'm proud to announce that not only are we officially members of the West Suburban Special Recreation Association, but residents can register for fall programs right now. We did put the link online last Tuesday, and as of Wednesday afternoon, we had our first registration, Donovan Ceramic. So we're very happy about that. Obviously, I would like to extend a thank you to the Executive Director of WSSRA, Marianne Burko, who was at many of our meetings, along with their Superintendent of Recreation, Annie Hart, along with our Village Board of Trustees, the Village President, and Village Manager. Together, we condensed what is typically a year process into 6 months. If you would like more information or to register for one of their amazing trips or programs, you can visit www.wssra.net, or you can visit the Parks and Recreation page on our website, and all of the information will be there. We're proud to be members of WESRA and to have the opportunity to serve every resident of Riverside, and we really owe that opportunity to this board. And a special thank you to the residents who also came to the meetings, communicated with the department and the board, and really showed our support. So, thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work on this. You really helped shepherd this through. Would you like to say a word about Ravinia while you're up there?
Sure. Friday, September 7th, will be our concert in the park, Ravinia. That'll be right in Guthrie Park from 6 to 9 p.m. And this year the theme will be country music with a band called Cowboy Jukebox. Fun fact, one of the members of Cowboy Jukebox is actually a former student at RB High School, so we have a little tie in there.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Moving on to ordinances and resolutions. First is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the Village of Riverside to rezone properties located at 7234 Ogden Avenue from B1C, Commercial Subdistrict, to B1TC, Transitional Commercial Subdistrict. Director Apt.
Yes, so the village received a rezoning application for the property at 7234 Ogden Avenue. That is the property just west of the McNeil Professional Building at the intersection of Ogden and Harlem. So the petitioner is requesting to change the zoning on that property, which is currently B1C, to allow the existing building to be converted from medical offices to residential condominiums. The new zoning district, the B1TC, which is our transitional commercial zoning district, allows for multifamily as a permitted use, whereas the current zoning district only allows residential units above the ground floor level. So the Planning and Zoning Commission conducted their public hearing back in May and did recommend approval of the rezoning, the map amendment, with a few conditions, and that was before you back in June. So back in June, when you discussed and reviewed the recommendation, some of you expressed some concerns about losing a commercial property on one of our major arterial roads. You were interested in the feasibility of redevelopment in this area and felt the petitioner needed to do some additional due diligence to assure the board that the proposed residential condominiums were the highest and best use for this property. The village board did table the discussion to October 16th, so here we are. You asked them to do their due diligence and you also asked staff to do a little bit of work as well in contacting the neighboring property and see what their intentions were. That would be the McNeil Professional Building. And you also asked that staff get a full-sized plat of survey from them so that we can verify whether it was possible for them to meet the parking requirements. We did reach out to Loyola Hospital, which does now own that McNeil Professional Building. They bought McNeil Hospital and its properties. They said that they don't have any plans to sell the property at this time. Although it's not full, it is occupied by 3 physicians groups, a diabetes center, a wound care center, and an outpatient imaging center. The petitioner has obtained a new real estate agent and relisted the property. It's been on the market since July, I believe. You do have a copy of the sales brochure in your packet. We were able to review a full-sized plat of survey for the property, and unfortunately it does not appear that they can meet the parking requirement for the 12 units that they were originally proposing. The petitioner was notified about this, and his architect has been working on it. They ran some models, and they are saying that they can accommodate 19 parking spaces on the site, which would limit them to only 9 units in the building in order to meet our parking requirements. So Dr. Sheik is here along with his architect. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. You still do have the ordinance before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have as well.
And we do have an existing motion before us, so that part is done. So questions, conversation?
I'm sorry, what is the existing motion?
To approve the
To approve?
the ordinance amending the zoning map in accordance with planning and zoning.
I mean, from my perspective, I'm not moved by this. I think that turning a commercial opportunity into residential homes is a huge mistake for the community. If you drive down Harlem Avenue, it's all residences. I think that, when was the building listed?
Dr. Sheik can answer that.
I mean, it's been less than a month, right? So a month and a half.
Not exactly a month.
Right.
But this has been my fourth attempt for listing. I have actually,
When did you list it, is what I'm saying?
Most recently.
that was about a week after the last meeting we had here 2 months ago. But prior to that, this building has been listed 4 times, including auction. And I was not able to get rid of it, you know. As I mentioned, that I'm losing about 120,000 a year, you know, on taxes and the mortgage. The occupancy is only about 16% right now. I just want to show you that we have been making attempts, not just now. Going back, you know, very fancy brochures, from $9 per square foot down to, we even put out my daughter and my wife had 4 hospitals in the area, bringing it down to $7 a square foot. We have not had any commitment so far.
Have you ever had anyone, have you ever turned anyone down? Has anyone ever come to you?
Only people who want to rent like just a room or two, like 200 square feet or 300 square feet, because it's not set up that way. You know, the minimum suite is almost about a little shy of 2,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, Mr. Paul.
I'd like to ask the petitioner a question. So you understand now that you could only do 9 units, and is that acceptable to you?
Yes, that's these gentlemen representing the architectural company who's working with me. And forgive me, I don't know the technical language, like, you know, leaving the grain space all around the area, where we cannot really put more than 19 parking spaces. So that's why, you know, he can speak for himself what he has looked at. He said he cannot really do more than the 9 units.
So you
Which will be
understand
about,
that?
yes, I do understand.
That's all.
That would be about 18 parking spaces.
Just to clarify, that's not a deciding factor for me. I just wanted to make sure that, because if it wasn't acceptable, we don't need to talk about this.
Right. Other comments? Please.
I think I go back to my previous comments, which are I think are even now more important. I think the real estate tax bill now for 9 units will be significantly less than a vacant office building. I don't think that's positive for the village. And I also believe if we have 9 units that house people, that consume village services, that consume school services most likely, we lose money on that. I think we lose significant money on that based upon the services that would be consumed. So from a village perspective, I cannot understand why we would consider this as the highest and best use of that property from our perspective. And I think that's what we're obligated to consider, not, unfortunately, not your specific financial situation.
I understand that. I have actually another option which I've come up with, that I can donate this to some charitable organization, and I'm in about 53% tax bracket. And I come out ahead. I have $600,000 mortgage, and I can get about $900,000 plus back through the tax breaks through this. So I just cannot continue to see how I can drain myself year after year after year. More than half of my salary is going into this. And I honestly understand your point of view. But the thing is, like we have done everything possible we could do. We were just trying to break even. And the difficulty is, we all know, you're very bright people, some business people, professional people. There's no place anymore for office buildings, Everybody's struggling, the people next door to us. So that would be my next option, would be just to donate the building and walk away from it instead of putting every year into negative cash flow. And I have consulted that with my accountant. He says that is possible to do.
Other comments? Going once, going twice? No?
Now, just to reiterate this, I have here some papers that it was occupied about 47% in 1915. So that's almost over 3 years ago. We have been trying and trying and trying and having no success with this at all. So it's not just we came up with the idea today. I've thought about that a year ago, 2 years ago. Instead of taking on the headache as a physician, I work still part-time with advocate. So I'm just trying to see eventually how can I solve this problem. If you guys have any idea for me, you think which may work.
I have a question. So it's listed at 1.5 million. What's your mortgage on it?
Mortgage is about 630 something right now.
And the reason for the large asking price is, you're asking $900,000 over the mortgage. Maybe that's a way for you to be more aggressive on the price.
Actually, we listed it at one time. A while back was, I think, about 1.1 million or something like that.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt this line of discussion here. The board's not here to give investment advice. We're here to set public policy. So we understand and appreciate your situation, but that dilemma, unfortunately, is up to you.
No, I respect that.
So you have before you a motion to approve an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the Village of Riverside to rezone the properties located at 7234 Ogden Avenue from B1C to B1TC. So an aye would be to agree with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Nay would be to overrule the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is that correct, sir? Please call the roll.
Trustee Powell.
No.
Trustee Giza.
No.
Trustee Lumsden.
No.
Trustee Ballerine.
No.
Trustee Sedovey.
No.
Trustee Peters. No.
Motion fails. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We wish you well.
Yeah, thanks.
We move on now to considerations, and first up is a discussion of the CIP for 2019 to 2028. Director Johns.
Good evening. Before you tonight, we have the capital improvement plan spanning years 2019 to 2028. This was a little bit difficult plan to put together based on where we ended fiscal year 2017. So Village Manager Francis helped prioritize some of the projects into high, medium, and low for next year. We also separated out the rollover projects from 2018 and those with a dedicated funding source. Some of the items of note as we start to review this capital improvement plan and start talking about the budget for next year. The current estimated combined unassigned fund balance in the general fund and total capital projects fund at the end of 2018 is $343,037. This does not cover the amount of projects in the attached plan. We have a couple options for additional funding. At the end of 2017, the village had available $448,000 at IRMA and $90,000 at NSEBC if the board chooses to direct staff to withdraw some of those funds. That is an option. Also reviewing the village's current fund balance policy. We have a committed fund balance for 25% of the next year's expenses in the general fund. However, we also have an assigned fund balance of 100% of debt service for the next year. So if the board decided not to have some of those fund balance assignments, that could be an option to free up some cash. Are there any questions about those options, or we can go into the specific projects?
The last two options, would that have any negative effect on our bond rating?
With regard to tweaking our fund balance policy, just in general, with regard to cash flows, I wouldn't recommend tweaking that, because that is a Government Finance Officers Association best standard, recommended practice, essentially. With regard to the debt service, that's something that's just on top of what we do with regard to the cash flow component. I don't think it's necessarily a bad philosophy. I think when the fund balance policy was adopted over 10 years ago, the debt service fund balance was low at that point in time, and so they wanted to make sure that there was enough cash for timing purposes, similar to property tax, since that is the main component that feeds into that payment, to make sure you had enough to make your payments. In speaking with Director Johns, we have 2 different installments. So to say that we need 100% of that balance is high now, given the fund balance level within the debt service fund. So that's something that I think would be a productive discussion, because there is not only, and I always forget the technical, is it an assignment considered under the debt service fund and then a commitment under the general fund? So it's essentially there is money that is obligated under both the general fund and the debt service fund for annual debt service payments.
It's restricted under debt service and assigned.
You got that right.
I know.
It's on tape. You can watch it.
So essentially we have over $500,000 that we pay out in a fiscal year debt service. The greater portion of that amount is under the fund balance for the debt service fund. But we have about $270,000 that we kind of reserve just in case, also under the general fund.
So, okay, in 15 words or less, what percentage would you feel comfortable with, and what and with that percentage, what kind of dollars are we talking about?
I would be comfortable just obligating the monies that are currently under the debt service fund as the fund balance requirement versus having it split between the 2 funds. Essentially, we're saying we're going to cover 100%, so the expectation that we're not going to collect any property tax in a given year is somewhat high.
Okay, but what, give me that
It's
dollar.
$270,000. You're welcome.
Okay.
That's what it would be.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
If I may, what I would suggest before we get to that policy decision would be to take a look at the proposed projects to see. I mean, as I looked at this, basically the difference between the fund balance in the general fund and the capital projects fund and the proposed projects is $151,000 shortfall. However, of that, and I wanted to ask Chief Weitzel this, so get ready, Chief Weitzel. There is a line item in here at the board's direction of $130,000 for the surveillance cameras, which, of course, in that the $130,000 would be a much more comprehensive first step. And I think what the board was interested in when we talked about this was starting out with 1 or 2. So, Chief Weitzel, could you tell us if we were to start out with, a couple of the cameras, how much would that cost us versus the $130,000?
I can assure the board, if we started out with just a couple of cameras, it would be under $130,000. If we went with 2 or 4, I could be $40,000 to $50,000, maybe $60,000. So just a couple of cameras is not going to reach the 130. I was projecting 130 between like 6 and 8 cameras at the start, and that would be double heads. It's a little in and out of the intersection, so it's a little bit. And then the type of camera we would select, if it be a pan tilt zoom camera, would be a little bit more money. But when I meet with these vendors, if we wanted to start at a lower level, I'm sure that we could come in under 130,000. Lower level meaning less cameras to start the program.
So that's a substantial savings right there if we just scale back the number of cameras we start out with. I just want to bring that up.
Well, and there are other opportunities to revisit assigned fund balance items and redirect that way as well.
Exactly. I mean, another, and not to shotgun it, but my thoughts was when I looked at the wayfinding signage, for example, that is a rollover from 18. We could always reduce the number of directional signage that we put within the village at this point, and then as funds free up in the future, we could add that. And I'm not even going to look at Trustee Peters while I say the next one. The $50,000 for the next phase of the marketing plan. I think that would be something that we realistically could scale back a little bit. I would not want in any way to stop it altogether, but if we cut it back to $30,000 next year versus the $50,000 requested, we
don't have 50,000 budgeted for 2019.
It's 42, right?
We pushed it to fiscal year 2020. That was the recommendation.
That's not what I saw.
The marketing. I think while you look that up, though, so for people at home not to get spooked, we're talking $130,000 of a deficit right now, assuming we do nothing, $4 million fund balance. So I don't want this to be too alarmist. We've got some tools to work with here.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay, you said the marketing and branding.
Oh. No, that's in here as well.
That's in 2020.
Oh, that's in 2020.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just wait fine. You're in the clear. Okay, so those are my thoughts. I don't think there's any point in going through this line by line by line. We've done this before. So any other thoughts about this? Any places that you find things that you think are not worth?
I agree with what you said about the cameras and the wayfinding. I mean, I'm a big proponent of the cameras, but we don't need to do that all in 1 year. I mean, we should just do a little at each year.
So Chief Wetzel, could you get that for us for a future meeting? Can you find out if we were to start off with 2 cameras, how much that would?
Yes, I'll reach out to a vendor and have a walk through the village, and I'll come back with some hard numbers.
Okay.
Chief, I would also like to know, if 2 cameras cost whatever, let's say we do the 130,000. My thought process is if we step this year after year after year after year, it's going to end up when we get to this point, it's not going to be 130, it may be 180.
Correct.
I'd like to see us do it. If we're going to do it, I'd rather see us do it right.
Well, I could ask them what 130 would get us, and then we could scale down. I could bring those back to the board and say 130 was 12 cameras or 16, but the board was interested in 8 or 6 because that was 60,000. So I could ask the vendors what it would get us, and then I'll bring that information back, and we can have a discussion if you want to scale it down, and then get some numbers for building it up in the years beyond that.
Perfect. And I'd also like to know where you would consider placement of these cameras too.
Yeah, I think to your point, we need to we got to go the other way with it. We should prioritize, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then figure out how many we need to start with.
Yeah, so I could go that route by prioritizing what I think the intersection should be and share that with the manager and get some feedback to the board on those intersections or entranceways are feasible, like do they have electric already, those types of things, and then come back with that information included.
And then to Trustee Ballerine's point is it 10,000 per camera, or is it 10,000 per camera if we do 12, and it's 20,000 per camera
Correct.
if we only do 4, so we could probably.
Yeah, perhaps there's an opportunity if we are working with getting multiple bids from different vendors, and we've touched upon this in discussions, but perhaps structuring in such a way of we're locking ourselves into a particular vendor and perhaps doing a multi-year agreement so that the first year they install X amount, but locking in the pricing. for 2019 dollars versus 2020 or 2021.
Yeah, I'll keep the manager updated, and we'll come back to the board with that information.
Other thoughts as you look at this overall?
Could you refresh my memory on the CBD bicycle parking project? Because again, this doesn't fit my memory, and it looks like we may have obtained an additional grant that I wasn't aware
No,
of.
we've always had a grant for it.
For 100% of it?
No. We have additional money for anything kind of related to the Metro Station from the West Suburban Mass Transit District. So some of that grant funding can be allocated towards this project. And so given some of the amounts that have come in, we were able to draw from that fund to be able to fund it 100% through grant funding.
Okay.
So it's a grant we already had, but we can, based on where some of the pricing came in for other things, have money to
Got
allocate
it.
towards this project.
So it is all grant funding?
So it would all be grant funding.
And this, again, can you tell us exactly what this $60,500 gets us? That was the one.
That is going to get us a bike shelter and bike parking in said shelter, as well as bicycle racks throughout the central business district, and replacing the existing ones that we have, like here in front of the library and Township Hall and over at the train station, to the U-racks that kind of fit with the streetscape design that we selected back when we were going through that process.
So these are the numbers we discussed a month or
Yes,
so ago?
so I'm
Okay.
actually hoping to be able, I should be hearing back tomorrow on CMAP's decision on adjusting the scope and not having to do the bike shelter. So I should have a definitive on that. If we don't do the shelter, then that will bring the price down some, because the shelters were around $20,000. So that'll bring the overall project cost down.
But just remember, if it brings the overall project cost down, then we're getting less of a grant.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's less grant money there as well, so.
I'm also fuzzy about the new permit tracking software, this Bob's code.
Yes, currently we use an Access database that was created by a gentleman named Bob, and he trademarked it himself, so it's his proprietary software that we utilize. We were lucky enough to be his guinea pigs when he was a grad student in 2003, and we've been using that software ever since. So he is no longer supporting said software. It's not mobile capable. It's can't accept online payments. So I mean, it's a system. We make it work for us as best we can, but there are definitely systems out there that can integrate with financial software, be available online for people to be able to track permits, apply for permits online, et cetera, that is going to free up a lot of time for my staff in actually executing the processing and issuing of permits and entering inspections and monitoring property maintenance, et cetera, by going with a newer software package. That was in the budget for 2018. However, the pricing for it came in a little bit over what we budgeted for, and then given the financial constraints and that we wouldn't be executing it during our busy season anyways, rollover wouldn't happen at this point until 2019, or kind of rollout wouldn't happen until 2019 at this point anyways, so we're rolling it over to fiscal year 2019. Hopefully.
At one point we were talking and we tabled it, but the concept of like rehabbing a lot of our software programs, would this have been considered under that? Since we didn't do that, is this a piece that or would that have been something different?
It's actually in there as well for new financial software. We're both looking at the same software package, so they would fully integrate. There's a large.
It's not the same cost, right?
No, they're different modules. They're different modules.
Okay.
And by combining both of those software packages, the community development and the financial, we were able to negotiate a cost savings.
So, Director Rapp, you've been the one most thoroughly involved with the wayfinding signage.
Yes.
What do you think is a realistic, if we were to phase this, What do you think a realistic way to do that would be? Or if you want to think about that and
I would say we'd probably need to focus on more things that CMAP identified, because we know then that they've been identified over and over again as areas that need the gateway signage. So it'd be focusing on maybe those gateway signs at first, and then we can, maybe the next year fill in either directionals or additional gateway signs that we want to do from there. And then maybe after those are done, if we want to consider replacing our parking signs, we can certainly move to replacing our parking lot signs to something that then matches.
Can you prepare a schedule for us? That would
Yeah, I
show
can work on that,
breakdown?
definitely.
Anything else?
I have one more question, just because now I'm focusing on low priority. Public Works in the Selborne Alley. This is, I think, the first, I'm sure I've heard about it before, but now I'm focusing on it. Could you help us there? Sometimes my view is sometimes these alleys, residents don't want them to be nice, smooth, and shiny, because then people go quicker down them and they become more accessible.
Built-in speed bumps.
Yeah, let's add speed bumps to it. Did it need repaving?
That's, you could almost consider that an unimproved alley. It outlets onto Harlem Avenue. It's in tough shape to maintain. It's probably in the worst condition of any of our alleys. There's a number of multifamily housing units there that are, that really basically serves. I don't know that the public uses it so much. Of course, it's in terrible condition. I think one of the trustees just made a good point that it deters people from using it probably in the condition it's in. So this is, some proposal to do something about it. It's been sitting there for a number of years, and like I say, it's hard to maintain, keep in a passable condition. So here's a proposal to try to do something with it.
I would assume 99% of the people in the village doesn't even know that alley existed. I went down it by mistake the other day, and I was actually surprised when I came out on Harlem Avenue. I mean, I was like, wow.
It's been there a long time.
Yeah. Low priority is a good name for it.
Attorney Morris, can I ask you a question about this? A special service area. Can you explain what that is and if that would possibly be something that would be appropriate for this kind of project, since it really seems to benefit a very kind of limited.
Right. It's a public improvement financing tool where the cost is divided between the residents who are directly benefited by an improvement in the village. An assessment is made as to what the public benefit is versus the private benefit. There's a particular statute that governs the steps taken to do that. And if it goes into place, the improvements are made and the benefited residents pay a portion of that as additional real estate property taxes over time to repay their share of it. So it's recorded against title as a way to facilitate that. My understanding, this predates me, but I think historically some of the road improvements in Riverside were done.
At one time, all the roads were, because this almost seems more like a driveway than it does a public road.
And also, we've had requests of some residents to close access points from Harlem Avenue, and here we're creating a newer, nicer access point. I mean, maybe there is a case that can be made that, it's costing us $25,000 a year to maintain it, so we might as well just fix it, but I don't get that sense. But I'm welcome to that idea, but I think this is something that could certainly be pushed out.
Could staff take a look at the...
I don't believe any garages actually come off of that alley.
I think there are some for another apartments.
Two by the apartments, correct. I would say no at this point. Okay. But we'd like to go very
Maybe we have to maintain stuff for public safety. If it's not a public safety issue, then that opens up a lot of latitude. That's the only point that I was making. You guys needed to do what you need to do to keep us safe. And those people who live there safe, then that's a different set of scenario. If it's not, slow down.
I think it'd be worthwhile to take a look at the
Absolutely
SSA.
Yeah, one more point. Alleys are a common object of special service areas because of their limited benefit. It's often limited to the people who live adjacent to them.
Anything else? Okay, so staff will get back to us on the items that we requested, and we'll take another stab at this. Thank you very much, Director Johns. And lastly, we have a further discussion of vacation rentals. Director App, you're back on deck.
Last meeting, we presented a draft code amendment for you for vacation rentals. At the meeting, you discussed a bit about how to limit the occupancy based on the suggestions that we had. We had put in there changing it from the current 1 guest per 200 square feet to a maximum of 2 guests per guest room, not including children under the age of 5, not to exceed a maximum of 4 people per guest room. And the board suggested that we change that to children age 12 and under would not be counted towards the occupancy, and that the maximum occupancy should be 2 per guest room, adults, not including the kids 12 and under. So we have adjusted the code according to that. We also discussed proposing that there be a minimum 2-night stay at that meeting, so we've made that revision to incorporate that into the draft before you. There's also limiting it to a maximum of 5 guest rooms at a vacation rental. So ultimately that would put you at a maximum of 10 guests at a vacation rental, if it's 2 per guest room, not including children 12 and under. It also has been modified to establish that the property must be the owner's primary residence. Some other things, though, that staff is requesting that the board discuss that weren't discussed at the last meeting. Didn't make a final decision on at the last meeting. Does this occupancy rate include visitors? And does the board want to prohibit visitors to the vacation rental? Should the licensee or their manager be required to be on site if there are more than a certain number of guests? I also would like you to discuss whether or not we should increase the license fee. Currently, we just charge the base business license fee, which is $100. We would like to see perhaps it being increased to $500. Believe that it would be increased would be better to be able to recoup our time for reviewing these applications and performing the necessary inspections and calculations in order to issue the license. Also, should vacation rentals be permitted in the village's landmarked coach houses that are permitted to have dwelling units in them. Currently, the village does have 14 landmark coach houses that could have dwelling units. I don't know that they all do, but they are landmarked as coach houses, and so I believe some of them do have dwelling units in them. So something that really kind of wasn't talked about before, but that is probably something we should consider, is if somebody wants to do a vacation rental in their accessory structure coach house, and whether we're okay with that. So you do have the latest draft amendment before you with those changes, and then just looking for your feedback on that, and we can make those adjustments. I believe you did receive an email from our one licensee holder today that had some comments about this, and then I believe we have somebody, a neighbor, that might want to say something as well. So.
I would like to start once again, maybe move this along and make a motion that we eliminate all vacation rentals and Airbnbs from our residential area and keep them only in the B1 district, B1 and B2. If somebody wants to do something like this in the residential area, I think they should be a bed and breakfast. I think one of the things that's different between, putting possibly 10 to 15 people in a house without the same fire regulations that a bed and breakfast has, and not having an owner on process or on the premises, I think is a danger. How many times have you been somewhere, in a new place asleep and something happened? You have no idea where it's at. Vacation rentals, we don't have the same type of, regulations that we do as an Airbnb, and I think that's dangerous.
I think we don't have the same sanitizing issues in the kitchen, and we know that the kitchens are being used. We don't have the same exit issues. We don't have the same second floor issues. I mean, the list of, I printed it small, but the list on the B&B is quite a bit, and none of this is on the vacation rentals or Airbnb. So I think that's a real problem. So again, I would not want this, I would not want 10 people, 5 people, or whatever next to me. So I don't plan on putting it next to my neighbors. So I make a motion that we just eliminate Airbnb and vacation rentals from the residential district.
So, hold on just a second. I would ask Mr. Mars a procedural question. So this is a discussion item.
Yeah.
So technically is this motion proper, or would it be to direct staff to bring back an ordinance that would accomplish that purpose?
Right, I understand Trustee Valerie to be directing the next steps by staff through his motion, because we can't, first of all, during discussion, take final action, and second of all, doing this requires a zoning code text amendment, which involves a public hearing, et cetera. So there are next steps, but if the motion is to provide direction to staff to make that happen, that's an appropriate motion.
So you would amend your motion to that? Okay.
I would ask clarification then, based on your point. If we adopted at the next meeting what was written here, would that require a public meeting, text amendment, all the costs and time associated with that?
No. Okay. Because this is, the amendments you're looking at today are all within the building code of the village, which is not subject to the public hearing requirements of the zoning code. But if you are, right now, these are permitted uses under our zoning code in the residential district. So if you want to undo that, that is what requires a public hearing. If you just want to amend your regulations that still apply to residential and commercial, that's no problem without a public hearing.
So, let me understand. So if we want to leave it as it is, but adjust it, add more, bolster the language on noise criteria, parking criteria, and do all that, we can do that.
Yes.
Without the public hearing.
Yes.
Angle, right? Because again, I reflect back, and I appreciate you guys speaking on my behalf when I wasn't here last meeting. It's the first time liberal and my name have ever been used together, Mike. So, anyway.
You're out of order.
Yeah, I know. So again, because I think that when I had a chance to reflect back on it and do a little bit more research, it was noise and parking that were the complaints of the neighbors. And if we enforced the noise and ordinance, or had enforced the noise and ordinance, we wouldn't have had the problems. I also look back at CMAP and the EDC, they kind of recommended this kind of stuff in our town to help our town as we do it. I mean, Joe, you talked about the bed and breakfasts, and I think, Ben, you even shared some of your experiences as a positive thing. So I'm kind of unwilling to throw the baby out with the bathwater because we had 1 or 2 instances that didn't quite go as well as it should have. I'm not saying that we may not have to do that in the future if that's a reoccurring thing. So I'm kind of the opinion when it comes to the vacation rental piece to leave it as it is, work with the neighbors to get them to get along and deal with the noise and parking issues if they exist anymore, and then start to look at something regarding special use for different events, which I think that they were starting to have at that location, the one that we currently have. So, and that's where I think you talked a little bit about special use for things going forward, right? Because I think if we just totally scrap the vacation rental process right now, then we need to talk about, is that one grandfathered in? Because then we would be providing harm to one person because we flip-flopped a decision we made. And I don't think that's a fair and reasonable position to the one licensee we have. Right? So if we can modify it and tweak the language, bolster the noise verbiage so that it gives the innkeeper better opportunities to keep their renters in check, that's good. If we demand or change it to that they have to be there on site, on premise, I think that's positive. I think that's will help the situation. So I think some of those things would probably benefit and keep us moving forward with what we want to do with CMAP and that sustainable business
So let's at this point, let's stay on focus with Mr. Vallerie's motion, which is to eliminate this in residential areas. Mr. Pollack.
In effect, his motion is to send this to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I say that because we cannot tell the Planning and Zoning Commission what to recommend to us. We may say, or we may, if we approve that motion, they'll know what our preference is, but they could come back and they could recommend that it be a special use. So in effect, that motion is to send it to the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at the zoning. I'm okay with that because I personally believe that it should remain as a special use in residential districts. I think the regulations we've been talking about are good guidelines for vacation rentals and bed and breakfasts, and I would want some form of that in the ordinance, but I would also want some flexibility that when we consider a special use, if they have a large property that can accommodate 12 people instead of 10, I want the ability to say, yeah, that's okay. Or if they say, I want to have 2 events a year and here's how I'm going to regulate it, I'll notify the neighbors in advance, whatever, I might consider that in certain circumstances. So, that's what the special use is for. One is to let the neighbors have input, and also for us to review each one in isolation and say, well, based on your property and your circumstances, we need to add these conditions. We can expand on this, but we have to limit this further. And now, will people bother going through a special use? Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. But I think technically it's the right way to go with this. At least give people the opportunity and the village the opportunity to have vacation rental or bed and breakfast in residential districts.
Which Mr. Morris. So, because that's different. Mr. Vallerie's motion is to not allow this within the residential area. In order to accomplish that, he would have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and go through the hearing process, as Mr. Pollack just outlined. But what Mr. Pollack just articulated is not Mr. Vallerie's motion. So what do we do with that?
After I clarified the motion the last time, it was to direct staff to take the next steps to enable the board to change eliminate these as a permitted use in the residential zoning districts. If we want to rephrase it as direct staff to send this to planning and zoning to examine the issue of, I mean, you could put in there, as he did, to examine whether these should be eliminated as a permitted use or a special use in the residential zoning districts.
I mean, I appreciate the process that you're talking about, but it also seems to, I mean, we have been grappling with this for weeks, if not months. The idea of putting that onus on the Planning and Zoning Commission when it's just going to come right back here, is there some way more efficiently to handle that?
If you would just want to send it to them with general direction to discuss the proposed amendments and consider permitted versus special. I mean, we already know that they recommended it as a special use to begin with.
But that's not what Mr. Ballerini is asking for.
Right.
I mean, I think Mr. Pollack is correct. We can't send something to the Planning and Zoning Commission and say, send us a recommendation to do away with this. That's improper.
Right. Well, yes, but you can ask them to consider whether it should be eliminated. That's
or made a special use in the alternative.
Yes.
This, to me, it goes back to the bees. We're killing this thing to death. I mean, I think, as Trustee Lumsden said, we can address it within the building code.
Yes.
I disagree that it's a special use. I think it's a overreaction to the original intent here. The original intent was we wanted to encourage this. We didn't want to create a nuisance. That was the whiff. We didn't want to create a nuisance, but we wanted to encourage it. And our frame of reference was maybe a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom where you've got 4 to 6 residents. I don't think any of us envisioned
23 being the first licensee. Now, though, what I'm afraid of is we've swung all the way over here, and we're only focused on fixing this 23 occupant situation, and there is no way that someone that wants to have 2, 4, 6 guests is going to go through the special use process. So 2 things we're doing there. We're effectively killing it, and in the meantime, we're just postponing the discussion, increasing our costs, creating more public hearings, and beating this thing to death. I think that it can be solved within the building code, and I don't think sending it back to planning and zoning does us any good, is it's just going to come right back to us again. But we have to do that. I understand that if we do want to see it as a special use or completely eliminate it. So again, my vote is I like what was drafted here. I thought it was a compromise. I think like Trustee Lumsden, I probably could accept more than what's here, but I think that this is a good compromise that still introduces a concept that I think initially we were all favorable on, that CMAP recommended, but we need to fix it so that the neighbors are happy. I think within this, I don't know what our parameters are, but I'm sure there can be some notice provisions built in within the building code for neighbors. So that's essentially a special use, or at least it's a knowledge. But I'd rather see that than starting this over in another 2 or 3 month process with more open meetings, more public hearings, more legal time, more drafting. It's kind of for one applicant.
That's a great comment. So VRBO stands for vacation rentals. I think it was a whiff on the entire idea of doing this. I think that it should only be in the central business district, because when people move to Riverside, they move here to live in Riverside and have a home. We talk about porches, we talk about backyards, we talk about neighbors. And if it were me and every person that I've spoken to, they don't want to live next to transient neighbors. And that's inevitably what this is. If you go to VRBO, you don't generally rent a house in a residential neighborhood that's not a vacation destination. You go to Seaside, Florida, you go to Dublin, Ireland, but you don't go to a community where kids are riding their bikes outside. I mean, it's not what you ordinarily do. You do go if you can get 20 people into it. And you can go to a big city and you can get 20 people in it, and you use it as a central point for a bit large crowds. I wouldn't want to live next to it. I wouldn't want to live next to 4 people. I wouldn't want to live next to 20 people. The number doesn't matter to me. I don't think that the economic development aspect of it for me is a non-factor. I don't think you could put a price on a neighbor's happiness. I think that when you go back to what Mrs. Bear said in the very first meeting, had she known that her neighbors were upset, she would have stopped. She would have stopped. Her neighbors are upset. And I think that that's what we're forgetting here. There's not as many people here tonight from that area. I see one that spoke, but I mean, the people that have reached out to me are concerned about living next to transient neighbors who are visiting for short periods of time, and I would be too.
Well, just for process, and not arguing or making a point, for process, Attorney Mars, is there a way to effectively eliminate this without going to a public hearing and updating the zoning code?
Ultimately, no, because it's listed in your zoning code as a...
But what is the cost associated with that, since it's the village is initiating it?
It's the publication cost and...
That's it, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Drafting of the findings of fact of the text amendment.
Right. If the amendment consists of leaving the text as it is, except for making these prohibited uses in the residential districts or switching it to special, that's a very simple amendment.
If the house was in the central business district, this would be fantastic for Riverside, but it's not. And
I think we need to just differentiate between going forward and any other ones and the existing one we have.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
If we harm the existing one we have, we created the harm on them, and we probably are a little liable.
We made a mistake. I mean.
We should write a check for it.
Well, to start
That's
with,
not what I'm saying.
to start with, we have no pending renewal application.
Well, I understand that.
And we are, and yeah, I disagree. It's illegal.
I
Mr.
disagree
Powell.
on that. I mean, we set something out there, some people invested some money in it, and now, for whatever reason, we're changing because of a couple of people that brought in a concern that we haven't even validated yet.
Okay, 'cause first of all,
So-
more than a couple people. It was basically the whole neighborhood. And
John, I haven't met with any of them.
that's our job, is to listen to the residents.
I agree.
And I think that's
All of the residents, not just the ones you get along with or the ones you don't. All of
That's not
them.
fair. That's not.
No,
that's
I
not
think
fair.
that's accurate.
That's
So-
not accurate at all.
So, again, I think we need to have council take a look at what liabilities we would be putting ourselves up to take a 180 on something. I think we need to differentiate between the one situation that we have and if a potential grandfather clause helps us with that, or if we're going to totally eliminate that to have it in the central business district going forward. I think that's good. We need a special use. I think that's an option as well. Try and balance it out.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to what Trustee Lumsden's saying. I don't know if it's solvable, but I'd like to look into that some more. But the reason what I wanted to say, and this is just clarification, but there's a perception out there in emails we get and other input I get that the village was unanimous in 2016 in doing this, and that's simply not true. The Plan Commission recommended a special use for this. Only 4 trustees voted in favor of this in 2016. It was unanimous, 4-0, but I don't think it's accurate to say that the village was just unanimous in saying, let's do bed and breakfast and vacation rentals as a permitted use. The Planning and Zoning Commission, I think, I don't know if it was unanimous or not, but they recommended that it be a special use. So, this is not like we're suddenly doing a complete reversal as a village, in my opinion.
How did we deviate away from the special use then?
I thought it was 5-0. At least that's what the minutes said, and I think you were absent. But
I thought.
But yeah, no. The lens we had at that time, and a lot of it was being led at the time by the Economic Development Commission, I believe, was this was a positive thing. I'm not even sure. I don't even know the timing on this, but it was viewed as a positive thing back then. The framework has completely shifted now. Now it's a negative thing, and we were trying to make something good of it. And it was this exact same thing. A special use kills it, because who is going to go through the special use process for 4 guests to do this, for 60 days for 4 guests? No one.
You're right. It was very positive, but it wasn't all positive to making it a permitted use. I personally would have objected to it, but, I lost my opportunity, and that's my own fault.
I'd like to clarify one thing, Scott. It has nothing to do with the individual homeowner today. This has to do with, for me, it's the entire concept. I just don't think that there's a place for it in the residential district. Whether it's 2 people or 20 people, for me, doesn't matter. I think it's a central business district opportunity, not residential. So I just want to, it has nothing to do with the independent.
And that's fair. And that goes back to my point, though. If we should poll, and if 4 of you think that we should do that, I think there's a way we can do it by putting restrictions in the building code to just make it almost impossible to not do that. But that's just my thought.
So is your concern policy or economic? That you're concerned about the cost of the public hearing? Because the cost of the public hearing is
I don't consider that negligible, because it's staff time. It's 2 more months. So what happens when we get an application? What do we do the existing application? I mean, if someone...
We have an existing one that has been submitted, and Director Act can
But that's
speak
from
to
the business
that.
district.
Yes, it is. It is in the business district with regard to the renewal that was initially submitted that was withdrawn.
Yeah.
So we don't even have an application by someone in the residential district, only in the business district.
At this time, correct.
Correct.
So this, so why spend all this time chasing something that's not there? Now is the time to shut it, because we don't have an application. Shut it, be done with it. Let the Planning and Zoning Commission talk about the business district. They understand, I think, the way we feel, or the way I feel. I don't know if that makes any difference, but at least, I think now's the time to do it, if we're going to do it.
I still feel the same way as I did last meeting. I'm not ready to give up on this. It's been 2 months since we heard the first complaint on this. I do feel like we're shifting kind of dramatically from where it was. I don't think the EDC actually ever opined on this or had an opinion. But I do, look, I think that there has to be better restrictions, and whether it is a special use, I would be open to that. Would that require a public hearing as well?
Yes.
Okay. So, I would be in favor of tightening up the restrictions similar to what we've seen here in the text amendment. I'm not ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do think that there are people out there who would be utilizing this service the way that I think it was originally envisioned in 2016. I wasn't on the board, but from what I understand, utilizing these facilities as a place where you can have extended family go if they're in town for something. To me, a huge difference between an event space, which is what I think has caused a lot of the problems that have raised these issues. To me, that's why it would be special use, is if it became like an event space, VRBO, am I saying that right? Vacation rental, right? Like, that's where I think of where I go with my family to spend time with them, right? And not to have an event, to have a retreat, to have a whatever. So the difference for me, I don't want to throw that out just because we haven't been able to define that line yet. I do agree with you though, Trustee G, so this has nothing to do with the current, current licensee or the person who's currently doing this in town. And I do think that there has to be some additional, like some of the things that were proposed in the questions that you raised. I think they're very helpful, but I think we have to come back to this table and say, we can't throw this out yet because it's only been in existence for a year. Someone's been doing this a year.
So as an example of that, what a scenario might be where they can do the vacation rental piece, which is where just a group of people go, it's a family member, it's extended family, it's a visitor of another person in Riverside. That's what we all envision this to be. It's kind of grown in the one situation that we have where all of a sudden there was bigger events. So at that point, wouldn't those events need to be a special use? So when the bigger events happen, then you go and you say, okay, so somebody wants to have a small 20, 25 person wedding in the backyard, then that would be a special permit use. If they want to have somebody come and provide a lecture or something for some corporate event, then that would be a special permit. That would then give the neighbors proper notice.
Well, I don't think you can do a special use for every single event someone wants to hold.
I think we're confusing terminology. A special use has to do with the designation of the LSU. You're talking about a special event permit, which currently the way the special event permit process works now, only organizations are eligible to do that. The draft that you have in front of you has that as a potential for a bed and breakfast, but currently not for a vacation rental. And the reasoning for that was a bed and breakfast is a special use. So with regard to I have two questions for you, Mr. Morris. So could we put within the building code, could we require notice to neighbors?
Yes.
And could we have it set up where the actual issuance of the license for the vacation rental needed to be approved by the board?
Yes.
And that would accomplish exactly the same thing as a special use. I think so. Within the building code. Yes.
I'm fine with that, and we've talked about that. The only question I would have for the attorney is, what criteria do we use in issuing or not issuing that license?
Sure, and we would have
write that
we
out.
would have to specify that.
Within the building code.
Yes.
And I think that's.
I'm okay with that.
Well, what is the criteria that the Planning and Zoning Commission uses to provide a special use?
Right, it would probably be very similar to impacts on the neighbors and that.
So we already have a template for that.
It doesn't look right for us to remand it to planning and zoning
I
and come back to us. I mean, you know, it's our decision.
Exactly. So it's 3-3. I think that we should.
But it's a tie.
And I think, yes, I believe it is. Well, okay.
No, I think that you might have a majority of us who would agree to what you just described.
Okay.
I would.
What I just described.
Yes.
Which is not Mr. Ballerin's
Right.
motion.
Right. I just said a majority, not unanimity.
But do we need to actually have a vote on Mr. Ballerin's motion? Can we vote on it within the context of consideration?
You can. It's directional.
Okay. So the motion before us is to help me with this, Mr. Mars.
Well,
is to remand this to the Planning and Zoning Commission to make a consideration of whether either it should be a special use, whether it should be prohibited within the residential district, or whether it should be resubmitted to us as it currently stands.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Or to kind of put that all together, direct staff to have the Planning and Zoning Commission consider the appropriate zoning designation of vacation rentals.
So everybody clear on what we're voting on? Yes? Call the roll, please.
Trustee Pollock.
No.
Trustee Giza.
No.
Trustee Lumsden.
I need clarification. We're doing it.
No, we're not, I don't think that we need to remand it back to the planning and zoning. I'm saying I think we should make a decision ourselves. We can do it ourselves, but I'm saying.
That's a no. Okay, no.
I'm sorry, so Trustee Lumsden, your
No.
vote is no?
No.
Okay.
No.
Trustee Sedeby is a no?
Okay. All right, so back to the issue at hand then. Before we get to the questions that staff has given to us, let's look at the document that you have in front of us. And I draw your attention most directly to, I think, what was the most difficult thing that we were grappling with, which was the maximum occupancy. And this was from this kind of builds on what Mr. Molina suggested. So if you look at page, so we're all clear what we're talking about here. 175, the packet, 326.8B. Just to make clear what we're trying to get at here, because it is cumbersome language.
I got it. It might be back up.
Do you have one?
I might have it back up. Hold on.
They can share.
No.
Can you guys share this? So the concern after the last meeting was the overall total occupancy at any given time in one of the vacation rentals. So the idea here is that you could have a maximum of 5 guest rooms. You could have 2 people per guest room, not counting children 12 and under. And at no time could you have more than 2 times the number of guest rooms, and that would include invitees. So, for example, if you had a 3-guest room vacation rental and you had 2 adults in each of the rooms, there could be no invitees. If you had 2 adults staying in a vacation rental, then you could have a maximum of up to 4 invitees because the other 2 were not occupied. So that's this attempt. If you can think of a better way to get there, I'm all ears.
I would be fine with just saying 4 non-overnight guests in the vacation rental at any given time, maximum of 4. Make it simple, easy to enforce.
4 invitees, whether they're invitees of the owner or the renters.
Right. If you're in the process of vacation rental, you can have your friends over, or the renters can have their friends over, but you can't have both where it exceeds 4 people.
So that would be a situation in a 5-guest room rental, you would have potentially 14 people. And notably, that would include invitees of the owner or the renters.
I'm fine with that because it's absolutely impossible to enforce unless it's a nuisance complaint and you have someone counting. So it could be 2, it could be 10, but yeah, 4 is a decent number. It makes sense.
Is there agreement on this? I'm looking for shaking heads.
I'm still fine with 200 per square foot, so.
I mean, I'm not fine with it in residential areas.
This is a compromise, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
we're allowing 10 people.
Well, if you had
10.
if you had 5 guest rooms, you could potentially have a maximum of 14 people there, not counting children 12 and under, because you could have the 10 renters and 4 invitees.
I'm talking about staying overnight. What's the maximum
10.
amount of people can stay overnight?
10 plus children under 12.
Two per guest room.
2 per guest room and
Plus
children.
Plus children.
Not to exceed 10.
How many children can be there?
Maybe with 10.
I'm sorry?
12.
What's the total amount of people that can stay overnight? What happens if I have?
Why don't you just make it a flat number?
What happens if I have
children?
7? If I have 7 children under 10?
Yeah, we did talk about that last
Make
time.
it 10.
Yeah, I got other issues.
Because, to your point, though, it's not, because you don't want to have a Indian guides camp out, too, there.
I like tying it to the number of bedrooms somehow, because you don't want to have a 2-bedroom with 20 people in it. With a 5-bedroom, you can.
Well,
It's 2 people per bed.
it's 2 per,
It is tight.
But just, well, that's what I'm saying, just make it 10.
But in the bed and breakfast, in the B&B regulations, there is a calculation to how many people can be in a bedroom. I'm pretty sure I read this.
I believe that follows our building code regulations, so if we get an overcrowding complaint, the International Building Code has a regulation on how large a bedroom has to be per person. So I believe that the bed and breakfast ordinance follows that regulation.
So why don't we follow that?
So
what would a standard bedroom, what would that be? I mean, you couldn't fit 6 people in a standard bedroom. So, I mean, no matter how many kids. So, I mean, if we follow the bed and breakfast ordinance, I think we would eliminate the issue of having that problem.
yeah.
of having unlimited numbers of children
Correct.
occupying the rooms with their parents. Yes.
So, can you
we
make?
can we can pull that language and add that into there.
Okay. So,
It's not saying that children couldn't stay in there, but there would be a sort of life safety occupancy regulation to that.
Right.
That's outside of that, like 1 per 200 regulation.
okay.
That's
So are we
specifically
okay
for
with
the
that?
bedrooms
And
itself.
So 4 invitees, and the maximum number, including children, will be set according to the calculation that staff will
But still
provide.
2 adults per
Still 2
guest
adults.
room, plus children in the total
12 and under, correct.
within those parameters set by the building code.
Right. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so are there any other questions with regard to the draft you have in front of you before we go to staff's questions?
I would like to see, why do we have such strict fire regulations on a B&B, but such lax fire regulations on an Airbnb when the same amount of guests can be in the house?
The idea was that in a bed and breakfast, you're basically looking at a hotel that's been stuck inside of a house. So you have different guest parties that are staying in individual rooms. So something that's operating 365 days of the year as a business. And I believe it kind of follows the state regulations as well, is that you have these fire regulations. So they need to have exit signs. Their smoke alarms need to be interconnected with the fire department. So it has that extra safety requirements to it. So those regulations were in there. When we originally drafted the vacation rental ordinance, we did have that in there if somebody was going to be renting out their Airbnb for separate parties at the same time. So if you were going to be home and staying in your room, but you were going to have guest party A in one bedroom and guest party B in another bedroom and guest party C in another bedroom, in those instances, how are you different than a bed and breakfast? And so really those same life safety requirements should be required. But if you are just renting out your home or your condo to a vacationer, so it's one party that's, 2 people or 4 people that are occupying the entire space, there wasn't necessarily a thought that that really needed to be there. The compromise was that we put up an exit plan, an emergency exit plan, clearly posted so that people knew how to get out. You are required to have a fire extinguisher that's, mounted in there and easily accessible for people to be able to get into. As we do our life safety inspections on it, if we see an area that's not safe and not code compliant, that is not an area that guests are allowed to go to. So there are areas in our current licensee's home that are off limits to guests. They cannot go into the basement. They cannot go onto the 3rd story, because if something should happen, the entryways to those areas are not code compliant, railing issues, size issues, landings, things like that. So as we were working through that process, there was areas that were identified as not safe for guests to stay in. Because they are not familiar with the home, they are not part of the homeowner's family, and so that was the limitations that we put on it. So,
and item D did bolster that language, right? You rent any portion of the vacation rental concurrent to separate guests. We don't allow.
Right. So in the new code requirements, we've taken that whole thing out, and now we're just saying you can't have separate parties. It just is one party that's staying at the home, perhaps in addition to the homeowner, but they're staying in the home. So we don't have necessarily that same requirements. Everybody's kind of together. Everybody's going to be coming together and trying to help and leave each other, as opposed to different parties that are not related and perhaps not going to speak to each other or bother to knock on the door of the neighbor of the other party. Their smoke detector has gone off and the other one has not. So,
But it's not without requirements. We have life safety requirements
yes,
for
I mean, they
vacation
have to
rentals.
have active smoke detectors.
Right.
They have to be
It's just not as
interconnected.
onerous.
It's just not as onerous a requirement for something that's not a 24/7, 365 days a year business. This is vacation rentals. It's basically an accessory use, and it's limited to only 60 days a year.
Can I ask one more question?
Other than Mr. Ballerine, does anybody have trouble with that?
Sorry.
No, but I just have a question.
Yes.
So we're talking about 2 people per bedroom, a maximum of 5 bedrooms, which is 10 people. But as many kids under 12 or under as, it's just such an arbitrary number.
No,
It's going to be defined.
That's going to be defined in terms
That's
of the
fine,
maximum
but
occupancy.
back to what Trustee Pollak said with the guests, picking a firm number being 4, why not simplify this? Because I'm sure that if I'm having trouble understanding this after reviewing it, others are going to have trouble. Why not pick a number and say 10 guests and 4 visitors are acceptable? Why have all these moving parts?
That's entirely up to you.
But I think we're waiting for.
You're going to have 10 in a condo, or
it's 2 per bedroom though. No, it's 2 per bedroom. So if you have a 2-bedroom condo, it'd be 4 people.
I think to your point, though, we're going to get a number. She's just going to give us the number. We've asked her to go get the number. We can
It's going to be
disagree with
based on
it.
the size of the room.
Right.
So we would have to
So
measure, in each case, we'd have to measure the room and then determine its occupancy.
It would make it much more simpler just to pick a number.
Yeah, it really would. I mean, it's like
Picking a number.
it's just.
4?
Maximum of 6 children. I don't know. You want a max of
Just
children?
human beings. No, 10 human
10 max
beings.
of-
2 per bedroom. I mean, keep it
And no
simple.
kids, no
Now,
additional.
how about
There's
this?
10 kids.
How about two per guest room? Maximum occupancy, including children, not to exceed 4 per guest room.
Not to exceed
Yeah.
what?
That's
Not to
20.
exceed 4.
That's 20 people.
4 per bedroom?
4 per guest
3.
room.
1 kid per bed.
So that would be
No, that's
2
20
adults
people.
and 2 children per guest room.
So you're up to 20 people.
That's
Yes,
20
but
people.
10 or more children.
That would be 10 children under 12.
And in any event, if the guest room was too small to handle 2 children, it would already be prohibited. Because that's,
I don't throw a number at it, you're going to that way or a number.
no, because that number comes from, it's statutory.
I would prefer to use statutory requirements because they're proven.
But the only thing, to Justice Keith's point though, now you're requiring our staff to go out and start measuring rooms.
To be fair, I already have to, because right now it's 1 per 200 square feet, so we're
Yeah, but
measuring the
changing
bedrooms
that.
and
But we're-
everything,
But
so.
we're changing that.
That's true.
So, you're not going to have to do that.
The applicant would provide that information on their application, wouldn't they?
Well, yes, they do provide a floor plan, but you got to verify things.
Well, you guys decide. We've got 2 proposals. One, pick a number, two, use the statutory determination.
I'm a fan of statutory because it's already set the precedence in other ways. I just wouldn't throw it at a wall.
Speak up, you got to decide.
I'm happy to do either, unfortunately.
Well, that helps.
Good answer.
I'm against it altogether, and I would have voted for this, but the fact of the matter is that 10 people in a house that are transient is more than enough people to be there, and if I lived next door to it, I would sell my house.
That is the problem, that's the problem with picking a number of 4 per bedroom, because you're right.
2 per bedroom.
2 plus 2 was, but you're looking at it as a 5-bedroom, I wonder if it's a 1-bedroom.
2 people.
2 people max.
Correct.
Whether it's, so
2 people per bedroom.
So
Yes, up to 4
so
guys.
there's no room for the wife or the kid if you have a family of 3 people.
I mean, look, this is a private residence next to other private residences.
No, we understand your position there. I guess my point is, and I think I'm agreeing with Trustee Lumsden, is a number might apply if it's 5 bedrooms, but it might not apply if it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. So
Again, if you use a statutory one, it's going to put the right amount of people that can safely be in the room, and not just an arbitrary number that we make up here, not knowing what size of room there is. That's the safe way to do it. That's why you do code-driven statutory square footage requirements, because they run formulas about how many people can have enough air in a room, how many people can quickly exit out of a 32-inch door, whether it's an in-swinging or out-swinging door, all that stuff. And that works into those size of bedrooms. That's how many people can operate in that space comfortably from an air perspective, from an exiting perspective, from not killing each other perspective, all that stuff.
And we're talking about children 12 and under, remember. It's always just 2 adults.
Again, trying to get back to allowing this to be accommodating to families coming to Riverside to stay with their kids and visit somebody else, or go to a Scuff Gross Memorial River Regatta. Things like that. That's what we wanted to make this happen. So how do we make that happen and limit it from the chaotic parties? Right? Because that's what we don't want to have. And that's what drove a little bit of some of the noise issues. So I think that's a fair and reasonable way to do it with something that's already proven.
I'll go with the consensus, but my preference would be to set a number on it, and that number being a minimum of 2 children under 12 and a maximum of 1 per guest room. So if you have a 5 guest room vacation rental, you can have 5 children total under 12. If you have a 1-bedroom, you can have 2 children. Then in between, and that way it's easy to enforce, it's easy to understand. But I could go, I don't feel strongly about it.
With the safety, so.
So you're okay with the statutory?
I'm okay with the
And I do, Trustee Pollock, I agree with what you're saying, but it will be clear when the application's made how
True.
many.
Yeah.
So it's not like we won't know.
Okay, so statutory.
Statutory.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Going to the questions from staff now. I think we've just beat this one to death in terms of the occupancy rate, including visitors. We've answered that question. Should the licensee or their manager be required to be on site if there are more than a certain number of guests?
Yes. Say no. We have a requirement that they own it, that they are a representative or within 30 miles. I don't think they need to be on site.
If you have 5 or more, I think if you have 5 or more guests, I mean, again, pick a number. But if you have a number of guests on the property, things can go south quickly.
I would agree that they should be on property. I think that would alleviate some of maybe the noise and.
Maybe not 2 guests, but.
Right. I think that, if there was better oversight, some of these issues wouldn't maybe have occurred.
But I think you're thinking of B&Bs. I've personally never been to a vacation rental, an Airbnb, a VRBO, where the owner's been there. And I think that's kind of creepy anyway. I wouldn't do it. I mean, I know some people rent like downstairs bedrooms. That's fine, but I wouldn't go somewhere where I know that the owner had to be there. So.
But I agree with you. I wouldn't go and stay in someone's spare bedroom. But I have stayed on property where the owner is on the property. He's in the main house, I'm in the guest house.
Well, that's a little different.
But if you're going to have, 5 or 8 or 10 or 12 people on the property, I think it's only reasonable that the owner should be on the property.
Again, I think you're looking at the lens of the existing situation. I would think very few applicants would have the flexibility to actually be on site with the guests.
Or even within 30 miles. I mean, what would be the purpose of renting your house out?
Well, they'd have a representative. There'd be someone, you have to have someone local to be in charge if something happens, to be contacted. There's always someone. I stay at these a fair amount too. There's always someone that usually is there when you check in or when you check out, or you need something and all of a sudden someone's there to help you. I mean, that's a vacation rental. I think, again, making someone be there physically is a way of killing it too.
How about this side of the table? Required to be on site if more than a certain number.
I'm fine with within a certain radius, they have to have a representative there.
But that's, so you don't require them to have somebody there if there's above a certain number? Okay. Okay, so the answer to that one is no. Okay. License fee increased to 1 to 500?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And then something we haven't really considered, the coach house question. Should vacation rentals be permitted in the village's landmark coach houses that are permitted to have dwelling units in them?
I would say that since we have discretion and it comes before us, we can decide that at the time, so it should be technically allowed, and if it meets our standards for approval of a license, then we issue the license.
So there's a yes, Mr. Gisa.
I have a coach house, so it probably would be appropriate.
Scott?
I wouldn't want that. I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Yes. Yes on that one. Anything else you need from us, Director Abt?
I have one additional
Yes.
item. So we talked about the board to approve future licenses. What about renewals? We bring it back every year for renewals as well.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes, okay.
I think so.
Yeah, but I would maybe, I don't want to parse this too hard, but I don't want to make it pay $500 every year.
No.
The renewal fee is less.
The renewal fee would be.
Because you don't have to go, what we want to try to do is recoup your costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to go back, right?
I believe it's every other year we go back for an inspection, but obviously it's not as intensive a review.
It's verifying what you did the last time.
Right,
It's not
exactly.
entering everything else.
So why not make that allowance? So the renewal fee will not be as much as the origination fee.
Are we suggesting that every year they have to come before us and notify neighbors and to renew their license? I'm not in favor of that.
I'm not either.
I mean, I could see the first time doing that, saying, okay, the first time we issue it, it's going to be, you got to come back to us, maybe.
Do you want to let staff handle renewals with the option to bring it to us if they feel the
Something
need?
like that, yeah. If there's been problems or
You okay with that?
something.
Because we do have some language in there about terminating a license, right?
Yes.
So that's the same criteria for non-renewal, I would probably suggest.
Yeah.
Another option is have them come back the first year they're renewing to review whether there's been any issues.
So the first
Or
year's-
come back if there
first year's
has.
kind of a probation year kind of thing. That's
Or
good.
to have them come
That's
back
what
if
I
there
just
have been
said.
complaints during the course of the year.
Okay, so they come back the first year and after that, staff will handle it.
For all renewal.
Yes, for
renewals. But if they submit a new one, anyone who submits.
Anybody new comes to us.
Okay.
Yes. That it? Okay, so at this point, do we want to direct, because this has all been discussion, do you want staff to bring back an ordinance for us to?
I would say yes.
Okay, and why don't we, because I know I think we have a pretty heavy first meeting in September, so why don't we shoot for the second meeting in September? Is that?
Can I ask one further question? What kind of mailing or notification radius are we talking?
With regard to neighbors. What do we do for a special use?
250 feet.
I mean, that seems like it's a thematic. We could just stay with that. Do you think that's appropriate? That sound okay to you?
Because it's consistent.
Yeah.
We can double check what we did for the bees and chickens, because I think we have a notification requirement
Yeah.
for those as well. I don't remember if we just did the immediately adjacent neighbors, or if we went further than that. I don't remember.
I would think that just policy-wise, it would be more akin to a special use. But yeah, just take a look.
I know some of the neighbors, the feedback that I received was that they felt that what we had done for the notification as a courtesy when we were discussing this again, said that wasn't sufficient. They felt it wasn't sufficient.
The 250 feet.
250 feet.
Let staff come back with a recommendation. Okay.
Why can we not address this at the next meeting? A full agenda to me isn't a good reason.
Well, because this is the first time that Attorney Mars is actually going to sit down and draft the actual ordinance. This has all been done by staff. So
we need more than 2 weeks to do that?
If you think you can get it ready?
Yeah, I can get it ready.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, just because I'm very unlikely to be here September 20th, so on a close matter.
Okay.
And just for clarification, sorry, I'm taking a lot of notes. For the notification to neighbors, is that incumbent upon the village staff to handle, or is that incumbent upon the licensee to handle and provide copies to village staff?
The latter.
Okay.
Right?
Well, that's what I want to make.
Don't you think?
Clarification.
Licensee notifies and provides proof of notification to the village.
Right.
Because they're the one driving the. Okay.
Would you like staff to have a standard form
Yes.
we can provide them to
Yes.
notify said neighbors then? Yes.
Okay. Any new business? We do have need for an executive session this evening to discuss pending litigation. So I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Not to reconvene, but final action will be taken. By Mr. Lumsden, second by Mr. Ballerine. Please call the roll.
Trustee Pollak. Trustee Giza. Trustee Lumsden. Trustee Ballerine. Trustee Setterby. Trustee Peters.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you and good night.